Hello! If you're visiting for the first time, it's fantastic to have you here. And if you're a returning listener, welcome back. This video features mostly true scary stories with the sound of gentle rain in the background. If you're looking for something to help with sleeplessness, anxiety, or stress, you're in the right place. If you enjoy the stories, I'd be grateful if you'd subscribe and let me know where you're listening from. I am curious. Thank you for being here. I have something really special just for you. Have you ever seen a doll that makes you feel all sorts of weird things? Well, I have a story about one such doll. It's a tale filled with chills and thrills, designed to keep you on the edge of your seat. So grab a cozy blanket and get ready to listen. And hey, I want to hear from you. Tell me where you're listening from in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for more exciting stories coming your way. But before we dive in, I've got an amazing secret to share. Have you ever wished to lose weight while you sleep without lifting a finger? I found this fantastic weight loss dietary supplement that can help you do just that. It sounds too good to be true, right? But I promise, it really works. Just click the link in the description below to learn more about this little miracle that can help you while you're dreaming. Now, let's get to the story of the doll that breaks hearts and bones. I remember the first time I saw her. Her big, bright eyes stared right at me from the dusty shelf at the old antique store. She had golden hair and a frilly pink dress that looked so pretty. But there was something strange about her smile. It didn't feel friendly. I felt a little tingle of fear, but the excitement of finding something unusual made me take her home. I named her Clara. The moment I brought Clara into my room, the air felt different. It was heavy like a thick fog. At night, I could hear whispers coming from her, but I couldn't understand the words. I thought it was just the wind outside, but sometimes I woke up to find her staring at me, her eyes open wide, her smile even bigger. It was creepy, but I tried to ignore it because I wanted a friend. One evening, I invited my best friend, Mia, over to play. When she saw Clara, her eyes lit up. "Wow, she's beautiful," Mia exclaimed, reaching out to touch Clara's hand. But just as she did, the lights flickered, and the room grew colder. Clara's smile turned into a grimace, and I felt a shiver run down my spine. "Maybe we should play something else," I suggested, trying to shake off the uneasy feeling. But Mia insisted. "Let's play with the doll. She might have a story to tell." I hesitated, but Mia's excitement got the best of me. We sat on the floor with Clara between us, and I picked her up to play. As we made up a silly story about Clara going to the moon, the doll's eyes seemed to move. Suddenly, Clara's smile twisted into a horrible frown, and I felt a tight grip around my heart. Something was very wrong. The next day was even stranger. I woke up to find Clara on the floor, far away from where I had left her. I picked her up and noticed she felt warmer than usual. "Mia, did you touch her when you left?" I asked, but Mia shook her head. "No, I didn't even get up in the night." My heart raced. If it wasn't Mia, then who had moved Clara? Later that night, as I tried to sleep, strange noises filled my room. It sounded like Clara was talking to someone. I peeked from under my blanket and saw the shadows dancing on the wall, twisting and turning. Clara was sitting up, her eyes glowing a bright red. My heart sank as her mouth moved, even though no sound came out. The whispers were growing louder, echoing in my room like a scary song. I wanted to run, but my feet felt glued to the ground. The whispers turned into laughter, mocking me, and the shadows grew closer. I remembered reading about haunted dolls and how they could break hearts and bones. I didn't want to believe it, but the fear took over. "Clara, stop!" I shouted, but she just smiled wider, a terrifying grin that sent chills down my spine. The next morning, I found a strange note under my pillow. It read, "You must choose. Keep the doll and lose everything, or let her go and save your soul." My hands trembled as I read it again. I didn't want to lose everything, but I was scared. Clara had taken control of my life, and I needed to break free from her grasp. I decided to consult the only person I trusted, my grandmother. She had always told me stories about dolls that had magic powers. Maybe she could help me understand what was happening. When I finally gathered the courage to tell her about Clara, her eyes widened. "That doll sounds like a cursed one, dear. You must be careful," she warned. "Can you help me get rid of her?" I pleaded. My grandmother nodded, but said it would take a powerful ritual to cleanse the doll of its dark energy. I felt a mix of hope and fear as we planned to do the ritual. I knew it wouldn't be easy, but I had to try. Later that night, we gathered candles, herbs, and salt in my room. My heart raced as my grandmother began to chant ancient words. Clara sat silently in the corner, her smile still eerie. As my grandmother spoke, I felt a chill in the air, like a ghost was floating around us. The candles flickered, casting strange shadows on the wall. Suddenly, I heard Clara laugh, a cold, echoing sound that made me shiver. Just then, the lights went out. Darkness surrounded us, and I could only see the flicker of the candles. My grandmother's voice grew stronger, and soon I felt a strong wind pushing against me. The shadows twisted and stretched, and I realized they were forming into faces, scary, distorted faces that grinned at me. Clara's laughter grew louder, drowning out my grandmother's chanting. "You can't get rid of me. I love it here," she shouted, her voice echoing through the room. My heart raced as I lay in bed, my heart thumped slowly in my chest, and I couldn't shake off the feeling that Clara was still out there, hiding in the shadows. My thoughts drifted, and sleep pulled at my eyelids, but I fought to stay awake. Every sound in the house seemed amplified, filling the quiet with the creaks of the floorboards and the howls of the wind outside. I pulled the covers tight around me, hoping it would protect my heart from more fear. Then, just as I started dozing off, a loud crash jolted me awake. My heart raced as I sat up, trembling in the dark. I slowly turned to the corner of my room, where I had placed Clara's empty doll bed after the ritual. To my surprise, the bed was now toppled over, the blankets askew. It was as if Clara had been there, playing and rolling around, even though she was no longer in my life. The sight made my stomach churn with anxiety. What did this mean? Was she trying to return? I slipped out of bed, my feet cold against the wooden floor. I walked cautiously toward the doll's bed, my heart pounding louder with each step. When I reached it, I noticed something glittering in the moonlight. It looked like a tiny glass shard. I knelt down to pick it up, feeling an odd chill on the back of my neck, as though someone was watching me. As I held the shard, I could almost see Clara's face reflected in it, her haunting smile twisting into a grin. Suddenly, I felt a breeze. The window was closed, so where was the wind coming from? I quickly glanced behind me, half expecting to see a shadow flitting across the room. Nothing. It was quiet, too quiet. I brushed it off, convincing myself it was just my imagination playing. Tricks on me. I decided to put the glass shard away, fearing it might be a reminder of Clara. As I rummaged through my drawer, I heard a soft giggle. It was faint, but it sent shivers down my spine. My heart raced again, and I spun around. Clara's doll bed remained empty, but I couldn't shake the feeling that she was watching me. The laughter echoed in my mind, wrapping around me like thick fog. With courage building inside me, I called out, "Clara, is that you?" I waited, breathless, hoping for a reply or a sign. To my horror, the only response was the echo of my own voice, mocking me. A hollow laughter burst through the silence, and my heart sank further. Was she here, or was I going crazy? I backed away, my heart racing as I realized I had to make sure my room was safe. I turned on the light, needing some comfort, but as the brightness flooded my space, Clara's doll bed seemed to glow. I instantly regretted it. In that light, it was clearer that the bed was not just tipped over. It had scratch marks on it, like something sharp had used it as a scratching post. I felt sick in my stomach. That night, I couldn't sleep at all. I tossed and turned, fiddling with my blanket, trying to push thoughts of Clara from my mind. But no matter how hard I tried, the memories came rushing back. I thought of her sitting on my shelf, watching me with her eerie gaze. I thought of the whispers and her twisted smile. Early in the morning, just as the first light started to break, I heard another noise, a soft thud coming from the hallway. It echoed like a footstep. I held my breath, listening hard. My heart raced as I cautiously got out of bed and crept towards the door. I felt like I was in a horror movie, stepping outside into the unknown, but I couldn't ignore the noise. As I opened the door, I caught a glimpse of something darting down the hall. It was too fast to see clearly. I felt coldness wash over me, and panic gripped my chest. "Clara," I whispered, not wanting to believe that it could be her. But deep down, I knew it was. Running on adrenaline, I raced down the hall after it, every step echoing loudly in the quiet house. I followed the sound until I reached the living room, where I turned and almost fell over. There, in the middle of the floor, lay a broken porcelain doll. Its head was cracked, the eyes staring blankly as if in shock. I felt a wave of fear wash over me. Had Claire done this? I reached to pick it up, and as I did, a chill shot through my arm. It was as if the doll wanted to stay where it was, like it had a life of its own. I hesitated, but I eventually grabbed it and saw a piece of paper tucked under the doll. My hands trembled as I unfolded it. "Find me before midnight, or I'll take everything from you," it read in shaky handwriting. My eyes widened in panic. Clara was definitely coming back, and now she was angry. I knew midnight was only a few hours away. What could I do? How could I stop this nightmare? I rushed back to my room, my thoughts racing faster than I could keep up with. I remembered my grandmother's words about darkness and how it can linger around. I needed to act quickly. I grabbed my phone and searched for anything related to haunted dolls and protection. The clock ticked loudly in the background, reminding me that time was slipping away. I found a potential solution, an old binding spell that could trap Clara's spirit forever. I struggled to concentrate as panic bubbled inside me. I gathered candles, salt, and herbs, just like my grandmother had taught me. The clock ticked closer to midnight, and I could feel Clara's chilling presence lurking in the shadows of my mind. With everything set, I lit the candles and began to chant the words from the website. The room darkened, and the shadows stretched across the walls. I could feel Clara's anger swirling around me, a storm of emotions that made the air feel thick with dread. The lights flickered, and I knew I was running out of time. "Clara!" I shouted into the dark. "You cannot have my heart or my soul." The shadows trembled, and I thought I saw a glimpse of her figure lurking outside the glow of the candlelight. I pushed the fear away and kept chanting, hoping my voice would be strong enough to overpower her laughter. Suddenly, the room shook violently as if a great wind had ripped through. The candles flickered wildly, and I felt a strong force pushing against me. I staggered, trying to stay focused as the shadows twisted and screamed, mingling with Clara's haunting laughter. "You think you can bind me?" she taunted, her voice echoing in the chaos. "I am your nightmare." Terror flooded my system. I couldn't let fear win. I raised the salt high above my head and shouted the final words of the spell, desperate for the darkness to fade. Just as I did, a blinding light erupted from the candles. The room shook again, and I could hear Clara's cries mixed with the wind. In that frantic moment, I felt my entire being pulled into a whirlwind of colors and sounds. It was as if I was being lifted from the ground, swirling around Clara, and I could hear her fury resonating with the shadows. "You cannot escape me," she screamed, her voice blending with the chaos. But I fought to hold on to my strength. I felt the warmth of the light cradle me as I repeated the words. "You have no power here." With every repetition, I felt myself growing bolder, lighter, as if the fear was being stripped away. And just as I thought I might buckle under the pressure, there was a deafening silence. The wind died, the shadows pulled back, and the light shone brighter than ever. Finally, I collapsed onto the floor, breathless and shaking. The candles flickered gently now, illuminating the room in a soft glow. I opened my eyes, heart still racing, and looked around. Clara's doll bed was still there, and the broken doll lay quietly like it was asleep, but there was something different. I felt a warm peace settle over me, as if the darkness had finally been lifted. Yet in the back of my mind, I couldn't shake the eerie feeling that Clara's spirit might still linger, hidden away, waiting for another chance to claim what she believed was hers. I knew I had fought a great battle, but the scars of fear remained, reminding me of the night everything changed. Even with the light around me, I understood that darkness is always waiting, always watching. As I gathered myself off the floor, I glanced at the broken doll, feeling a twinge of sadness. I thought perhaps in another life, Clara could have been my friend without that terrible curse. I shook my head, pushing the thought away. But deep inside, I wondered, for every whisper I heard and every shadow that danced in my room, would I ever truly be free? Time would tell, and I knew I would have to keep an eye out for any signs that Clara was still nearby. As the night moved deeper, I sat in the center of my room, surrounded by the remnants of my battle with her darkness. I promised myself that I would face whatever came next, knowing that Clara might still be out there, lurking in the corners of my mind. I had fought this battle, but the war was far from over. Days turned into weeks after the ritual, but the memory of that night haunted me like a relentless shadow. I tried to move on, believing I had put Clara behind me, but it felt as if she had left a lingering darkness that clung to the corners of my mind. I thought I could return to my normal life, but strange things started to happen. It began with faint sounds in the middle of the night, soft tapping like tiny fingers knocking on something. I lay in bed, too scared to breathe, listening closely, and each tap felt like a tiny heartbeat echoing through my room. One evening, I woke up to find my bedroom door wide open. I had closed it tightly the night before, and I could have sworn I heard something scuttling away. My heart pounded as I stepped into the dark hallway, where shadows loomed over me, stretching and twisting in ways that made my skin crawl. I called out, "Is anyone there?" But the only answer was the silence returning to me, thick as fog. I wandered through the house, checking every room. As I entered the living room, I noticed my grandmother's old rocking chair moving slowly back and forth, even though there was no wind. My stomach twisted, and I felt a cold sweat slick my palms. I could have sworn I heard a familiar giggle swirling in the air. It was then that I realized Clara was still playing with me. The unsettling thought sank deep into my mind, curling around it like a snake. I quickly turned away, deciding that I needed to find a way to protect myself and cleanse the atmosphere in my house once and for all. I grabbed some sage from the kitchen, remembering how my grandmother used to purify spaces with it. I had to make the spirits go away, every last one of them. As I lit the sage, the smoke curled around me, creating a protection barrier. I started in the living room, waving the bundle around while whispering words of power I hoped would work. The air felt thicker, almost electric, but I pressed on, moving from room to room, wanting to rid my home of this evil presence. Yet every time I thought I was safe, I felt Clara's laughter echoing in my ears. It was light and playful, but I knew better. It was mocking me, reminding me of my fear. I couldn't ignore the sound, and it made me want to shriek in frustration. As night fell, I planned to sleep with my lights on, thinking that would keep Clara away. I wasn't going to let her torture me again. Just as I drifted off, fatigue finally taking over, I heard soft whispers. They wrapped around me like a shawl, promising secrets and buried feelings that made me nervous. I opened my eyes to see shadows flickering on the walls, darting and retreating like playful children. Then, abruptly, the lights flickered, and everything went dark. Panic shot through me as I scrambled for my phone, but I forgot that the battery had died earlier. My breath quickened, and I could feel the warm air turning cold around me. I reached for my nightstand, my fingers fumbling in the dark, but I knocked something over. It fell with a loud crash, my glass of water spilling everywhere. "Clara!" I shouted in desperation, hoping my voice would chase away the darkness. I could feel her presence, thick and suffocating. I could hear her giggles, closer now, echoing in my mind, taunting me like I was her puppet in this twisted game. Suddenly, the whispers became clearer, forming words that sent chills down my spine. "Come play with me," they sang, circling around, drowning my senses. I squeezed my eyes shut, wishing the terrifying chorus away. "Why won't you come out and play?" It echoed, as if something cold was drawing closer, begging me to look. Ignoring the voices was impossible. They buzzed around me as they grew louder, like a swarm of flies, making me shiver. I had to do something. I jumped from my bed, stumbling around in the dark, looking for my sage, desperately trying to find it. Just as my fingers brushed against something cool, a surge of icy air washed over me, and I felt Clara's presence, suffocating and overwhelming. In a panic, I swung my arm downward, sending the sage tumbling. Before I could react, a loud thud reverberated in the room, followed by a soft whisper. "You can't escape me." My blood ran cold. I was frozen in place, realizing Clara was right here in my room. I felt the ghostly chill wrap around me, and I could see shadows dance in the dimness. I fished my phone out from the mess, praying it had any battery left. I flicked it on, illuminating everything just in time. The light flickered, and in its glow, I saw her. Clara was sitting at the end of my bed, her porcelain skin reflecting the light in eerie ways. I stumbled back against the wall, her mouth twisted into a smile that chilled me to the bone. "Why didn't you want to play, dear friend?" she cooed, her voice sweet yet laced with an unsettling undertone. I shook my head, feeling tears prick at the corners of my eyes. "I don't want to play," I cried, my voice wavering with fear. "Everyone wants to play." Clara grinned, widening until it almost seemed too large for her doll face. The shadows behind her grew bigger, swirling around in a fury, ready to snap at me. I remembered the binding spell I had tried to cast before. My only protection lay in that flickering light. Holding my phone tightly, I quickly said, "You can't have me. I bind you from this realm." The words tumbled out, fueled by fear and desperation. Clara's expression shifted, and I could see the flicker of anger rise in her eyes. The room darkened further, and I felt the temperature drop drastically. "You think that will work?" she hissed, her smile fading into a frown. "You think you can forget me that easily?" Suddenly, the shadows darted toward me, long fingers reaching for my heart as I felt an overwhelming sense of dread wash over me. My breath caught in my throat. I couldn't fight the sense of despair clawing at my chest. I retreated further against the wall, almost thinking I could melt into it. In that frozen moment, something tugged at me, an urging to move where the light was brighter. I took a deep breath, gathering every ounce of courage I had. "I declare you to be bound," I screamed, feeling the strength build up inside me as I pointed my phone directly at her. Clara's figure flickered like a candle, the light fighting against her darkness. Her laughter turned into a screech, filling the air with fear. "You think you can escape?" she bellowed, her voice piercing my ears, louder than thunder. But I continued to chant, forcing the words from my soul. I could feel the energy swirling around, battling against her evil. "You are banished from my life," I shouted, heart racing faster as Clara lunged forward, her expression twisted in rage. The room shook violently as Clara faced a whirlwind of burning light. My phone flickered and fumbled in my grip, throwing strange shadows. In that chaos, Clara suddenly halted, and for a moment, I saw fear in her eyes. The shadows swirled tighter around my feet, as if the darkness was fighting to hold on to her. But I wasn't willing to give up. "You will not take me," I yelled again, pouring all my energy into those words. I felt the sting of tears streaming down my face, the weight of my own power lifting me above fear. I concentrated hard, ready to expel her forever. With one last push, I closed my eyes tightly and let all of my fear leave my body with a roaring shout, "Leave me be and never return." A flash exploded in my mind as the darkness ripped away, Clara's laughter now a distant echo fading into the night air. When I opened my eyes, everything was eerily silent. I was left in the dim glow of my phone, the shadows retreating into the corners, no traces of Clara around me. But even with the eerie quietness surrounding me, I couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't the end. I glanced around, expecting the shadows to morph back into Clara's form at any moment. My heart was still racing, a reminder that Clara may have retreated, but the fear she brought was a constant companion, always lurking nearby, waiting for another chance. I took a deep breath, exhausted but relieved. I gathered everything that had fallen in the chaos, my mind racing with thoughts about what I would do next. I would not let fear control me any longer. I would fight against it, but in the back of my mind, I knew this was just the beginning of my struggles. I had gained a glimpse of my power, but I also understood that Clara was far from done. Whatever game she played, it was only a matter of time before she tried to return. I had to stay vigilant. I had to find a way to protect myself from her evil forever. My journey was just starting, and I could feel the shivering presence of Clara lingering near, lurking with her malevolence, waiting for the right moment to pounce again. The shadows whispered her name, calling to me in the night, a reminder of the darkness we shared. The sinister laughter echoed in my mind, making it clear that Clara wasn't gone. She was merely waiting, and I could feel that sooner or later, our battle would ignite again. Days passed, yet the terror of that night clung to me like a shadow. I tried to push it aside, but Clara's presence lingered in the corner of my thoughts. Even in daylight, every creak of the floor or rustle in the bushes outside sent chills racing down my spine. Despite my efforts to live normally, I kept glancing over my shoulder, half expecting Clara to leap out from the darkness. One afternoon, while cleaning my room, I stumbled upon a small, old box tucked behind a stack of books on my shelf. Covered in dust, it almost seemed to pulse with a life of its own. Curious, I pulled it out, feeling a spark of apprehension tingle along my fingertips. As I opened the lid, a wave of cold air spilled from within. Inside lay a collection of old trinkets, broken jewelry, faded photographs, and a small, tarnished key that looked oddly familiar. I lifted the key, a sense of dread washing over me. It felt like it belonged to something I had once known but couldn't quite place. Just then, a voice whispered in my ear, too soft to understand. I spun around, but there was no one there. My heart raced again. Was this Clara's doing? Ignoring the chilling sensation creeping up my spine, I decided to take the box downstairs. I needed to show it to my mom. Maybe she would recognize the key or the other objects. As I reached the living room, a sudden gust of wind burst through the open window, sending papers flying across the room. I felt a chill wrap around me, icy fingers grazing my skin. I turned to close the window, but before I could move, I caught a glimpse of something flitting past my peripheral vision. I gasped and jumped back, my heart pounding. Was it Clara? I squinted into the dim room, searching for any sign of movement. The shadows danced ominously, teasing my senses, forcing me to question my own sanity. "Mom!" I called, my voice echoing in the silence. But she was in the kitchen, her soft humming lingering gently in the air. I knew I had to push through this fear. I took in a deep breath before walking back to my room to examine the box once again. Later that night, I decided to investigate the old photographs. One showed a girl with a bright smile, a girl who looked strikingly similar to Clara. Unease filled my chest as I examined it closely. Why did Clara's face haunt my memories? The shadows seemed to grow darker as I turned the photo over, revealing a date written in small handwriting. January 23rd, 1995. That date struck a chord creeping into my mind. Today was January 23rd, 2025. My skin prickled with an unsettling realization. Something critical about this day was buried in my mind, something dark and terrible that I couldn't recall. I set the photo down, my hands trembling as the shadows in my room flickered and twisted, as if they held secrets of their own. Suddenly, a loud bang echoed from the hallway, breaking the heavy silence and making me jump. It was the front door. I glanced back at the photo, where the girl's smile felt eerily alive. Gritting my teeth, I stepped toward the hallway. "Who's there?" I yelled, voice shaky yet defiant. As I reached the door, I noticed it was slightly ajar, creaking softly against the frame. The outside air felt heavy, wrapping around me like a shroud. I peeked outside but saw nothing but an empty porch illuminated by the glow of a streetlight. Just as I turned to go back inside, I felt a soft caress on my shoulder, sending shivers racing down my spine. I whirled around, heart thumping in my chest, No one was there, but the sensation lingered, as though the air itself was watching me. I stepped back inside, slamming the door behind me and locking it tight, feeling the weight of the night pressing heavily on my chest. Restlessly, I returned to my room. Glancing at the clock, I noticed it was 11:55 p.m. 5 minutes remained of January 23rd, but it felt like an eternity. I sat on my bed, clutching the box of trinkets, my thoughts swirling. The whispers that had haunted me before returned, and I could almost hear Clara's voice mingling with the wind outside. "Come find me? Come play." An overwhelming urge gripped me. I had to confront my fear. I needed answers. Without thinking, I snatched the key from the box and decided to explore a dark, dusty corner of the house, the cellar. I had never been down there because everyone claimed it was haunted. The stories chilled me, but I felt as if something was drawing me down into the darkness. Descending the creaky stairs, I felt the air grow colder and thicker. My flashlight barely cut through the shadows, illuminating the damp walls and bare floor. The cellar seemed endless, filled with forgotten relics of the past. But there was something at the far end, something I couldn't resist. As I approached, I noticed an old chest tucked beneath a layer of dust. It felt familiar, as if it had been waiting there just for me. My heart raced, remembering the key still clutched tightly in my palm. With shaky fingers, I fit the key into the lock. It turned with a satisfying click, and the lid creaked open slowly, like a gasp of air. Inside lay various objects, dusty books, a cracked mirror, and a collection of dolls, each one more unsettling than the last. One of them caught my eye, a small, porcelain doll with sharp features and glassy eyes that seemed to follow my every move. I reached out to touch it, and the moment my fingers grazed its surface, a jolt of energy shot through me. I gasped, feeling something shift in the air around me. The cellar shook, and dust swirled violently, forcing me to shield my eyes. As I opened them, I saw Clara standing before me, just as she had the night before, her eyes glimmering with a haunting light. "No more hiding," she whispered, her voice echoing around me, as the shadows deepened, becoming almost tangible. "It's time to play." I suddenly regretted opening that chest. The darkness wrapped around me like tendrils, pulling me closer into Clara's realm. Panic surged within me, yet I couldn't move. The doll's haunting gaze felt as if it were consuming my soul, as if it was reaching out to claim me. "Join me in my games," Clara beckoned, and I could see the other dolls start to shift, their eyes lighting up with a sinister glow. I fought back the urge to scream, my heart pounding in terror. I couldn't let this be my end. With all my strength, I broke free of the enchanting hold she had on me and sprinted back toward the stairs. I stumbled and nearly fell as the force of the shadows clawed at my feet, trying to drag me back down. Each step felt like a battle against a suffocating weight, a fight for my freedom. Just as I reached the top, I threw myself through the door, slamming it shut behind me. My heart raced wildly in my chest, echoing in my ears as I pressed my back against the door, panting. But even as I stood there, the oppressive darkness didn't relent. I could feel Clara's laughter vibrating through the wood, a promise of torment. "You can't escape me," she taunted, and I knew right then that this fight was just beginning. Now, with the clock ticking closer to midnight, I realized I had to act, before Clara's game consumed me entirely. The pieces scattered around my room felt like a puzzle waiting to be solved, but the answer was hidden in the shadows lurking beside me. And the game wasn't just playful anymore, it felt deadly. With a surge of determination, I took a deep breath, clutching the box of trinkets tightly. If I wanted to end this nightmare, I had to confront the darkness. I looked toward the old objects that held ties to Clara, knowing deep down that understanding her would be the key to finally putting a stop to this horrifying tale. It was time to unearth even greater secrets, no matter how unsettling it may be. With the fear still coursing through me, I knew I had to uncover whatever secrets these objects held. I set the box down on my bed, feeling the weight of it pull me into its depths. My fingers trembled as I sifted through the items, pausing on the cracked mirror. Its surface seemed to shimmer in the dim light of my room, reflecting not just my face, but something darker behind me. I leaned closer, squinting to see if I was imagining things. For a moment, the air felt thicker, the shadows from the corners bending slightly. I could swear that in the reflection, I saw Clara standing just behind me, her wicked smile stretching wider than before. I yanked my head back, heart racing even faster. It was just a trick of the light. It had to be. The mirror trembled slightly in my hands, and I placed it back down, quickly glancing around to make sure I was truly alone. Determined to face whatever was haunting me, I picked up a dusty book from the box, the cover faded and brittle. As I opened it, dust motes danced in the air, and the scent of old pages enveloped me. The words were scrawled in a messy handwriting, but as I read more, the spine of the book seemed to vibrate in my hands. There were stories in it, tales that whispered of loss, revenge, and spirits trapped between worlds. My heart sank as I deciphered one particular tale about a girl who had been wronged in life and turned into a ghost, seeking solace through games, and sometimes taking those she played with. "What is this?" I whispered to myself. Every page I flipped revealed more about Clara, snippets of her story that I had never known. It explained how she was drawn to children, particularly those filled with loneliness or fear. It felt like she fed off their energy, growing stronger with every game played. The idea that I was part of her twisted plans sent shivers down my spine. In the corner of my eye, I noticed the dolls shifting slightly, their eyes gleaming more intensely under the dim light. I blinked, convinced that I was imagining it. But as I focused, I realized one doll had turned toward me completely, its mouth opening just wide enough to reveal a tiny, realistic scream. My breath hitched, panic washing over me as I stumbled back, feeling the cold wall against my back. Suddenly, from the depths of the darkness beyond my window, I heard a low murmur, like a soft chant. It sent wisps of dread racing through me. Leaning closer, I heard Clara's name mingling with the wind, a haunting lullaby that beckoned me away from the safety of my room. I gripped the edge of my bed, torn between the urge to run and the magnetic pull of Clara's voice calling me to play, to join her in darkness. Before I could make sense of what I was feeling, the lights flickered violently. The shadows elongated, twisting toward me like tendrils reaching through the air, almost alive. I watched in horror as the walls seemed to pulse, thumping in rhythm with my rapid heartbeat. Each outcome felt more real than the last, pressing against my chest, making me feel trapped within this nightmare. In that moment of chaos, I clutched the old book, desperate for answers. I flipped wildly through the pages. Then I stopped at a chapter titled The Binding Ritual. It was brief and ominous. I read quickly, heart racing faster with each word. It described how those who feared the spirits could perform a ritual to bind them, to finally put an end to their torment. My pulse soared with a mix of hope and fear. Could I actually do it? Gathering my courage, I whispered, "I can't let you control me." I felt emboldened by the thought of banishing Clara and the shadows that followed me. As I gathered supplies from the box, some salt, a candle, and a bit of string, I began to set up a small circle on the floor. As I worked, whispers grew louder, swirling around me like a storm. "You can't leave me," Clara sang, her voice echoing, taunting me. "You don't want to be alone." Ignoring her words, I finished marking the circle, my hands trembling with both fear and determination. I lit the candle and closed my eyes, focusing on the flickering flame. "I bind you, Clara," I chanted, letting the words flow freely. The air thickened, and suddenly it felt like I was standing in a storm, chaos roaring around me. I could almost feel Clara's presence press against me, trying to crush my spirit. "Play with me," she screamed, laughter blending with the wind. It drowned out my words, filling my heart with dread. But I would not give in. "You are bound," I shouted, voice rising above the cacophony of sound. I pictured the shadowy tendrils wrapping around her, squeezing tighter as she tried to escape. The shadows screeched, the walls vibrating in response to our battle. I could feel her anger radiate like heat, burning against my resolve. Just as the candle threatened to flicker out, a blast of wind surged through my window, knocking it open wide. The flame danced erratically, casting eerie shadows across my room. I felt Clara's rage growing, the whispers becoming frantic. "You think you can trap me?" Everything shook violently, the shadows swirling around me in a frenzied attempt to escape. I focused hard on the circle, determined not to let her break through. My heart raced, each beat echoing in my ears, the darkness clawing away at my strength. I could see Clara in my mind, enraged eyes penetrating through the layers of shadows, twisting her features into something grotesque. "This ends now," I screamed, forcing everything I had into the words. "I bind you. I command you to stay." The room exploded into chaos, winds howling as the candle flickered wildly. For an agonizing moment, I felt as though I might lose everything. But just when I thought I would crumble beneath the weight of her desperation, I felt something shift in the air. The shadows began pulling back, retreating to the corners of the room as though the light was banishing them. Clara's laughter transformed into a high-pitched scream. "You can't do this. I won't let you go." The energy pulsed. The very air felt alive with our battle, the cries of 1,000 trapped souls echoing through the walls. But I stood firm. "You have no power here," I cried. And just as I spoke, the candle burst into a blinding light. The shadows recoiled violently, trapped in the circle I had created. The heat radiating from the flame enveloped the room, burning away the darkness. And in that moment, I glimpsed her, Clara's true form, a flickering silhouette, just beyond the edges of the light. "This isn't over," she gnashed her teeth, eyes blazing with fury, her voice echoing as if from a deep well, a promise of return. Then, with a final stormy howl, the final remnants of darkness vanished from my sight. Breathless, I collapsed against the floor as the last shadow slithered away. The candle flickered once, then stabilized. Light flooded my room, illuminating every corner as the oppressive darkness finally lifted. I could hardly process what had just happened. My heart was still racing, my mind buzzing with adrenaline. But a part of me knew that while I may have forced Clara back, the darkness had not truly disappeared. Deep down, I felt her presence linger, a chilling promise that our game was far from over. I had to prepare, to gather more knowledge about her, before she would return. And somewhere inside, I could feel that this battle might not just be against Clara, but something darker, something that had been waiting in the shadows far longer than I had been alive. In the days that followed, the eerie feeling never left me. I tried to return to my everyday life, but the shadows that once lurked in corners of my room now clung to me wherever I went. I could sense Clara's presence, an echo of her fury hovering just out of sight. The fear turned my heart to stone, and I soon realized that I couldn't ignore it any longer. I needed to prepare for her return. I spent many nights poring over the book I had found, desperate for more knowledge about Clara and how to truly bind her. With each page, the tales twisted and turned into darker images, recounting children lost to shadows and spirits that never found peace. I jotted down notes, piecing together parts of her history that terrified me. How she once lived in a town nearby, drawing in lonely souls with her charm, only to trap them in her games forever. The thought that she could still be playing with the minds of other children sent chills down my spine. As I read deeper, I couldn't ignore the feeling that Clara was watching me. The whispers returned. Soft at first, they grew louder, wrapping around my thoughts like smoke, taunting me with the promise of her return. "You can't get rid of me that easily," echoed in my mind, a constant reminder that our connection went beyond just fear. It was personal now. One night, as I sat at my desk, a noise shattered my concentration. It was faint at first, like the patter of tiny feet racing across the wooden floor. My heart dropped. Was it her? I turned slowly, barely daring to breathe, the silence thick and oppressive. Just as I started to relax, I heard it again, a soft giggle, almost childlike. I felt my blood turn to ice. I glanced toward the door, half expecting Clara to be standing there with her malevolent grin. But the hallway lay empty and still. Gathering every ounce of courage, I stood up and crept toward the door. My feet felt like lead, hesitant and terrified of what might be on the other side. I had to know. As I opened it, the air shifted, carrying a chill that seemed to enter my very bones. Peering into the dimness of the hallway, a shadow darted out of view. I gasped, my heart racing as I followed it. "Show yourself," I called out, my voice echoing against the walls. I was met with silence, but then the laughter returned, echoing all around me like a cruel chorus. The sound bounced between the walls, and I felt it clawing at my sanity. I could sense her, playful and waiting just beyond the reach of the light. My bathroom was at the end of the hallway, and as I approached, the air grew thicker. The laughter transformed into a haunting melody that slithered into my ears, coaxing me closer. I froze before the door, uncertainty bubbling in my chest. I remembered the tales of her favorite games, how she lured children to the bathroom where shadows danced and whispers turned into screams. Taking a deep breath, I reached for the doorknob. The moment I touched it, I felt a surge of energy ripple through me. It was as if the darkness beyond the door pulsed with anticipation. With shaking fingers, I turned the knob and pushed the door open. What I saw sent a bolt of fear through my veins. The mirror reflected a twisted version of myself, my eyes wide, hair disheveled, surrounded by an unnatural darkness that seemed alive. The reflection smiled back at me, a curls of shadow forming a face filled with malice that looked strikingly like Clara. Confusion washed over me. I blinked, trying to gather my thoughts, but the reflection remained. Suddenly, the lights flickered, and the mirror cracked, spiderwebs of darkness radiating outward. I stumbled back, heart hammering in my chest. The phantom giggle rippled through the room, and an icy wind blasted past me. The bathroom door slammed shut, locking me inside with my dark doppelganger. "Ready to play?" the reflection whispered, and before I knew it, I was pushed deeper into the bathroom. I felt cold hands pulling at my arms, drawing me toward the mirror. I could see my own terrified face looking back at me, unable to move or scream. With all my strength, I fought back against the shadowy figures. I recalled the binding ritual. It could work. Desperation flooded my veins, providing the courage I needed. "I bind you," I shouted, forcing the words to spill forth despite the fear clawing at my throat. "I command you to leave." The shadows recoiled momentarily, swirling around me, but I pressed on, repeating the words louder and louder, my voice strengthened by adrenaline. The glass shook violently, and I could feel the air crackle around me. With a final roar, the shadow that looked like Clara lunged at me, fingers stretching, trying to engulf me in darkness. "You can't escape. You're just like me," it shrieked, the voice twisted with fury. That was the moment I realized Clara was not just a ghost. She was a part of me now, too. My fear, my memories, the doubts that crept into my mind. I wasn't just fighting against her. I was battling against everything I feared in myself. "I am stronger than you," I yelled, feeling the words surge from somewhere deep within. The flash of light ignited in the mirror, burning brighter as it consumed the shadows. I released the candle's energy, the light pushing against Clara's essence. The mirror pulsed, and with a final deafening shatter, it exploded, shards flying through the air like glittering stars. In that instant, Clara's figure disintegrated into a flurry of darkness, her cries fading into an echoing wail. I stumbled back, the cold air rushing past me as light poured in through the shattered frame. Fear still gripped my heart, but something felt different now, lighter. The shards reflected my terrified expression, broken and distorted. I felt a pull to that darkness, a reminder that Clara wasn't gone completely, a forewarning that she could find a way to return. Just as my breath began to steady, the remnants of her energy lingered, swirling around the room. "You think you've won?" Her soft, caressing voice danced in my ear. The shadows started to creep back towards me, whispering sweet promises of never being alone again. You need me, she purred. You cannot fight what you truly are. No, I cried, the fear rising again like bile in my throat. I fell to my knees, trying to steady my racing heart. It wasn't over, not by a long shot. I could feel her cold presence surrounding me, the boundary between our worlds blurred. Even with everything I had faced, I knew deep down that I needed to confront this darkness, to accept it without fear. Trembling, I reached for the remnants of the old book, desperate for guidance. I flipped hurriedly through pages, searching for a way to finally banish her and myself from this nightmare. The weight of Clara's laughter mixed with my lingering dread as I prepared for the battle still to come, determined to find a way to turn this darkness into light. The clock ticked ominously in the background, each chime a reminder that time was running out. I could feel the air swirling around me, mingling with dread and determination. I recognized then that this was not just a fight for my life, but also a journey to find the strength within myself to embrace the darkness, to transform it into something I could wield rather than fear. Clara would return, but I would be ready, armed with knowledge and a newfound resolve. And so, with each passing day, I would gather my strength, knowing that the shadows would whisper to me again. But this time, I would not shy away from their call. I would learn the truth buried deep within Clara's darkness, and in the end, my own shadow might become my greatest ally. The days turned into a blur as I immersed myself in the book. My nights filled with frantic scribbles and whispered chants. The whispers grew louder, blending with the crackling of pages and the ticking of the clock. Clara lingered like a fog, always close, her laugh echoing in my mind, taunting my resolve. Late one night, as I sat on the floor surrounded by notes and candles, a sudden chill swept through the room. I looked around, my heart racing in my chest. The shadows seemed to shift and swirl, swirling with a life of their own. I could feel Clara's energy pulsing through the air, thick and oppressive. The lights flickered, and I heard the unmistakable sound of soft footfalls behind me. I jerked my head around, fully expecting to see her. But again, the room lay empty. Yet, the air was electric, charged with the malevolence that Clara carried. "You can't escape me," came her whisper, so close I felt it brush against my skin. Goosebumps raced down my arms as I turned back to my notes, determined to shut out the fear. Hours passed, or maybe only minutes. Time felt meaningless. As I read, something shifted in the shadows to my left. I strained to listen, my breath caught in my throat. It felt like someone or something was watching me, waiting for the right moment to pounce. Suddenly, I heard it, a soft giggle, unmistakable and chilling. I bolted upright, heart pounding, every instinct screaming at me to run. But I couldn't let fear take over. Not again. I gripped the old book tightly, forcing myself to face whatever was taunting me. I took a deep breath and called out, "What do you want?" My voice shook, but I needed to show strength. Laughter echoed back, more haunting this time, wrapping around me like a suffocating blanket. The shadows coiled tighter, and I could see them moving, an army of darkness obeying Clara's every command, hungry for fear. The candles flickered violently as I pushed myself to speak again. "If you want me, you'll have to do better than that," I shouted, clenching my fists. The shadows paused, giving way to a moment of silence. Then, the echo of my challenge lingered, filling the air with tension. And then, just like that, everything began to shift. The shadows slithered closer, forming shapes that morphed into grotesque figures. They danced around me, and as they moved, I could see their faces twisted in torment. I felt bile rise in my throat. These were not just shadows. They were lost souls, trapped by Clara's enchantment. "Look how they suffer." Clara's voice slithered through the dark like silk. "Just like you, they wish to be free." Each word kissed my ear, dripping with malice. "Join me, and we can be together forever." Darkness crept around me, a familiar lullaby that tugged at my heartstrings. It tempted me to sink into despair, to give up my battle and surrender. But deep down, I could feel my own strength battling back. "Never!" I yelled, pushing back against what felt like an invisible force trying to hold me still. A gust of wind burst through the room like a wild beast. Papers flew everywhere, the voices of lost souls screaming in rage. I could barely see through the chaos as shadows poured from every corner, closing in, trying to suffocate me in despair. "Join us! Join us!" they wailed, a chorus of anguish that wanted to drag me into their depths. In the middle of the chaos, I remembered what I needed, the binding ritual. I knelt down and grabbed the candlestick. I had to be quick. I couldn't let Clara win. I set it down in front of me and began to carve a circle into the floor with the tip of the candle, drawing the symbols I had memorized. The witching words flowed from my lips, and as I spoke, the shadows hesitated, the dark figures swirling around me. "I bind you, dark spirits," I chanted, my voice rising above the turmoil. "You cannot keep my soul. You are afraid." For a moment, the shadows fell silent, recoiling as if struck. It felt powerful, the energy building around me like static in the air. Clara's laughter faded to a low growl, and I pressed on, pouring every ounce of my strength into the words. But just as I thought I was gaining ground, Clara's intense laughter erupted around me again, shaking me to my core. "You think you can trap me?" she screeched, and the shadows erupted into chaos, rushing at me. The room trembled. I felt the ground shift beneath me, and panic surged through my veins. Suddenly, Clara appeared before me, her eyes bright with fury and desperate need. She loomed like a dark goddess, commanding the shadows as if they were her loyal subjects. "You'll never banish me, and these souls will forever belong to me," she shrieked, her voice echoing with a chilling power that threatened to swallow my resolve. The shadows pressed in closer, some reaching toward me, desperate to pull me into their twisted embrace. "I won't be part of this," I screamed, striking out with the candle, waving the flickering light before me like a shield. "I refuse to let your darkness consume me." I pressed deeper into the shadows, reaching deep for my inner strength. With a surge of determination, I focused on the light, letting it grow stronger, brighter, until I felt it explode from my being. The shadows shrieked, their grip loosening as I fought against the weight of Clara's dark presence. "I bind you," I roared, the word echoing in a final affirmation of my will. As I spoke, a blinding light shot forth from the candle, illuminating the room, pushing back against Clara and her dark army. The shadows let out one last anguished wail as the force of the light ripped through them, scattering their essence into the air. The walls shook, and Clara's twisted face contorted with rage and despair. "This isn't over," she screamed, her voice echoing as the light enveloped her. In that moment, I felt a rush of triumph. The darkness flickered and faded, the last remnants of Clara's essence dissipating before me. I stood trembling in the aftermath, gulping air as the room slowly returned to normal, the shadows retreating to their hiding places. But even as the silence settled, I realized the battle might be won, but the war was far from over. I could still feel Clara's spirit lurking, and her promise of revenge echoed in my mind, a lingering reminder that I had not escaped completely. With trembling hands, I gathered my scattered notes, a sense of urgency settling in my stomach. I needed to understand her fully. I had to learn everything about Clara, the connection between us and the darkness that bound us together. So I dove back into the book, determined to uncover the truth while I still had the chance. The shadows may have retreated for now, but I knew I could hear Clara's laughter echoing in the darkness, waiting for the right moment to strike again. And I would be ready. I dug into the book again, flipping through the pages frantically, the images and words swirling in my mind like a storm. I needed answers. I had to understand Clara's darkness if I ever hoped to be truly free. It felt like the walls were closing in, the weight of her impending return hovering over me like a dark cloud, ready to unleash its fury. As each page turned, I became more and more aware of the chill creeping through my room. It was like the air had turned sharp, slicing into my skin. I thought about what Clara had said before she vanished. This isn't over. The doubt gnawed at me, whispering of her return. I glanced at the mirror, now just a shattered frame reflecting broken shards of my haunted self, and dread settled in my stomach. The night wore on, and outside, the wind howled, rattling the windows like some sinister ghost tapping to get in. I shuddered, a knot of anxiety forming in my chest. The shadows seemed to stretch and bend, curling around the corners of my vision. I would hear Clara's laughter echoing in the wind, instilling a sense of dread each time it ricocheted off the walls. Each chuckle twisted into mockery, urging me to let my guard down. I pushed forward, determined not to falter. My fingers skimmed over the words as I searched for spells, protections, anything that might give me a fighting chance. That's when I stumbled upon a passage that seemed to pulse with urgency. It spoke of a binding, a final ritual designed to contain dark spirits permanently. My heart raced. This could be my chance, the key to salvation. Without thinking, I gathered my supplies, candles and herbs laid out in front of me. I could sense the energy in the air shifting, vibrating with an intensity that made my skin prickle. I felt watched. A shadow flickered in the corner of my eye, but when I turned, nothing was there. Focus, I whispered to myself, drowning out my fear. I began to arrange the items into a protective circle on the floor, chanting quietly, and as I did, the air thickened. The shadows grew dark again, swirling around me, watching my every move. Was Clara among them, waiting for the right moment to strike? The candles flickered as I lit them, the flames dancing wildly. I concentrated on my breathing, forcing myself to stay calm despite the rising tension. Just as I began to feel a sense of control, the lights above dimmed, plunging me into an unsettling darkness. My heart raced, but I fought against the urge to flee. A loud crash echoed from my bookshelf, sending a shiver down my spine. I whipped around, heart pounding, only to find the books scattered on the floor. Panic washed over me, thinking Clara was trying to throw me off my game. "You won't stop me," I shouted into the looming shadows, my voice stronger than I felt. Silence fell, heavy and oppressive. But then came the whispering, soft and sinister, wrapping around me, coaxing me closer to despair. "They can't help you. You're alone forever," it hissed, echoing from all sides. I could sense Clara's presence, her breath on the back of my neck. The mockery deepened, turning into a low, menacing chuckle that sent chills down my spine. "Leave me be!" I cried out, anger igniting my courage. The shadows shifted, undulating around me as if Clara was testing my resolve, drawing closer in an attempt to hurl me back into fear. I began to chant again, louder this time, pouring every ounce of energy into my words. The shadows paused, momentarily hesitating before the air grew thick and heavy, pressing down on me, swarming in layers of darkness as they tried to drown out my voice. But I pressed on, determined, using the words as both shield and weapon. A flash of light burst from the circle of candles, illuminating the darkness for just a moment. I gasped as I caught sight of Clara's figure, pale and gaunt, monstrous in the fleeting glow. She was more than a shadow now. Her eyes glowed with an unnatural light, piercing through the darkness. "I'll play a new game now," she whispered, her tone sugary sweet, but dripping with venom. "You'll regret this." She lunged forward, and for a moment, I felt the room spin, shadows blending and swirling like ink and water. My heart raced with terror, fear and desperation pooling in my gut. I felt myself start to falter, doubt creeping in. Clara's voice echoed inside my mind. "You can't win. You're weak. You'll always belong to me." But in that moment of doubt, something deep within me surged, a fierce determination not to yield. "I am stronger than you think," I shouted, aligning the binding ritual firmly in my mind. With that, I thrust my hands forward, focusing all my energy on the candles, reciting the words again. "I bind you, Clara, to this circle, You will not torment me again." The shadows howled in rage, dark tendrils of smoke swirling violently, smashing against the barrier I created. The candles flickered wildly, almost extinguishing as the air crackled with energy, but I held fast. I felt my surroundings shift, the walls bending with Clara's fury, while her laughter morphed into a scream of frustration. "I won't be your puppet anymore," I yelled, unwavering, the truth of my words igniting the flames around me, creating a brilliant light that pushed back the encroaching shadows. Clara's form began to twist and writhe, her features morphing into a horrific visage as she clawed at the air, desperately trying to reach me. With one final push of will, I shouted the last words of the binding spell, my voice echoing as a surge of power erupted from the circle. The energy exploded outward, and the room flooded with light, consuming the shadows, Clara's enraged face fading into the brilliance. For a moment, everything froze, a split second of calm washing over me. Then darkness rushed back, spiraling away until I was left alone in the aftermath of a shattered silence. Panting, I sank to my knees, the reality of what had just happened washing over me like a tide. I could feel the tension in the air, but for now, it seemed subdued. Yet deep inside, I sensed that the battle was not truly over. Clara's laughter still echoed faintly, floating in the back of my mind. I knew she would return, and as I looked around my room, the mess of scattered books and extinguished candles told me this was only the beginning. Gathering my strength, I began to clean, the remnants of the chaos reminding me of what was at stake. I had to be ready for her next move. I needed to learn more, to dig deeper in her past, and find a way to sever our connection once and for all. Hours passed, but fatigue was the last thing on my mind. The fear that Clara represented kept me alert, eyes wide, as I prepared for her to strike again. The darkness outside thickened, and the wind howled menacingly. I knew that her presence was near, lurking in the shadows, waiting for the perfect moment to reclaim what she believed was hers. I couldn't allow that to happen. I had to keep searching, keep fighting against this unnatural bond, knowing that each step drew me closer to the ultimate confrontation. The real story lay buried somewhere deep, things I had yet to uncover, lessons she hadn't taught me. And so, I dove back into the research, pages shifting around me like whispers in the dark, knowing that the answers I found would shape the fate of us both. I turned back to the book, the pages whispering secrets as I searched for anything that might help. I was determined to find her weakness, the one thing that could finally separate us. Each line spoke of darkness, but I needed to find the light hidden within. The clock ticked loudly on the wall, each second stretching into an eternity, my heart pounding along with the rhythm. Deep in the night, the atmosphere shifted again, the feeling of being watched creeping back into my mind. I glanced around the room, feeling the shadows pressing in closer than before. The wind outside became a wailing gust, screeching through the night, as if warning me of the impending doom. I tried to ignore the growing dread and focused on the words in front of me. Just then, I heard it, a soft tapping sound like nails scratching across the wooden floor behind me. My heart froze. I slowly turned, dread pooling in my stomach. No one was there, but the tapping continued, seeming to move closer, echoing in the silence. "Stop it!" I yelled, my voice breaking slightly. I stood up, fists clenched, ready to face whatever was lurking in the shadows. The tapping stopped abruptly, replaced by Clara's voice fluttering in the air like a sinister lullaby, singing my name softly. "Oh, but you can't drown me out, dear friend," she cooed, her tone sweet yet dripping with malice. I shivered at the sound, feeling the chill run down my spine. Clara's presence wrapped around me like a blanket, suffocating and oppressive. "You think you can hide?" she taunted, her voice weaving in and out like smoke. "I have always been with you. You can't escape what you are." In that moment, I felt a surge of fear swirling with doubt. "What do you mean?" I shouted, the question spilling from my lips instinctively. I took a step back, readying myself for whatever wickedness lay ahead. Shadows flickered dangerously, seeming to pulse with Clara's energy. "You're just a shadow. Nothing more," I declared, trying to assert control, but my voice trembled. The air grew thick as Clara's laughter filled the room, reverberating in my bones. "But I am part of you," she whispered, her voice oozing with twisted glee. "I brought you into this world, this dark place where fear dances." Suddenly, the lights flickered ominously, casting an unsettling glow over everything. I could see shadows flitting around the room, forming grotesque shapes that twisted and turned in disturbing ways. The walls closed in on me, each corner darker than the last, and I struggled to breathe against the rising tide of panic. "No!" I screamed, desperate to fight back against the encroaching darkness. With every ounce of strength I had left, I focused on the binding spell. I needed to remember the incantations, the rituals that could hold Clara in place. But as I concentrated, the shadows moved closer, pooling around my feet, wrapping around my legs like a living entity. "You are weak," Clara cried, her voice rising in fury. "You will not break the bond we share." The shadows lunged forward, clawing at me, pulling me down into the depths of despair. I fell to my knees, struggling against the hold. The darkness seeped into my lungs, and I felt the panic tightening its grip. "Fight it!" I screamed to myself, digging deep, searching for that flicker of hope, that lingering light inside me that Clara wanted to snuff out. "You are nothing without me," she shrieked, the shadows swirling violently, and I could almost feel her breath on my skin. Just as I thought I might be consumed, a memory surfaced. My grandmother's words, whispered late at night. "Light always chases away darkness." With a surge of adrenaline, I began chanting the binding incantation again, this time more firmly. "I bind you, Clara! You will not take me!" I screamed, my voice resonating with raw emotion. The shadows hesitated, twitching as if startled by my defiance. I focused, envisioning a brilliant light radiating from my heart, pushing the darkness away. The shadows began to shrink, and Clara's laughter turned to rage. "You think mere words can hold me?" she hissed, but doubt crept into her tone. The walls trembled again, vibrating with the force of our struggle, the very foundation of this dark place shaking beneath me. Panic surged again as the darkness swirled around me, a churning mass of confusion, angry whispers clawing at my mind. But I pressed deeper, my voice rising above the chaos. The shadows began to flicker more erratically, as if they were unstable, losing their grip. "I command you to leave," I shouted, feeling a powerful surge coursing through my veins, burning away the dread. In an instant, the power surged forth, spilling out around me like a tidal wave of light. A blinding flash erupted, driving back the shadows, scattering them like smoke before a gust of wind. I dropped to the floor, panting hard, feeling the wave of light push against Clara's presence. "I will not be your prisoner," I gasped, the last remnants of darkness retreating into a corner, swirling in twisted shapes, revealing Clara's faded face momentarily, shock etched across her features. This isn't the end," she said, her voice a whisper now, more a hiss than anything else. "I'm not afraid of you anymore," I asserted, feeling the surge of power within me, illuminating the edges of my fear. The shadows twitched, struggling against the light, but now they seemed fragile, weakening under its brilliance. Yet as I held my ground, I knew this wasn't the final confrontation. Clara's influence was still close, lurking in the corners of my mind and the fabric of the night. I glanced around, my heart racing, half expecting her to lash out once more, to reclaim the darkness she believed was hers. Slowly, the room settled, the air thick with the remnants of the battle. A profound silence enveloped everything, yet the heaviness lingered, as if the very walls were holding their breath, waiting for the next chapter in this twisted tale. As I looked deeper into the book, my resolve hardened. I could not let fear win. I needed to understand the roots of this darkness, to follow Clara's threads back into the shadows from which she emerged. There had to be something more, a key to finally breaking the bond between us once and for all. With renewed determination, I began scouring the pages for hidden truths. Each line told a story, full of temptation, darkness, and sadness. It was all tied to Clara, a complication wrapped in loss and regret. I felt my heart ache, almost for her, but remembering her twisted laughter snapped me back to reality. As I turned the pages, I began to feel the weight of those lost souls again. Clara's power was rooted in their suffering, feeding off their pain, wrapping them tight in the shadows, and I knew that to defeat her, I would have to face that truth. The clock ticked louder in the silence, counting down the moments until Clara would return. But I had taken my first steps against her, and I would not falter. I would uncover the lost pieces of this puzzle, and in the dawn's light, I would find a way to end her reign, one way or another. Outside, the wind howled, thrashing against the house, but I felt my heart steady. I dug deeper, determined to unveil whatever dark secrets lay beneath those darkened pages, knowing it was the only chance I had left. The gripping tides of darkness still lapped at my ankles, but I refused to let them pull me under. I took a deep breath, trying to calm my racing heart as I forced myself to focus on the book again. There had to be something in those pages that would help me understand how to stop Clara for good. The air in my room felt thick, charged with energy that prickled my skin. I flipped through the weathered pages, searching desperately for answers while shadows breathed around me. As I read, I noticed a peculiar entry, almost hidden among the lines. It spoke of torn souls, bound by their darkest fears, lingering in the spaces between worlds. My heart sank as I realized those souls could be tied to Clara and her power. I felt a chill creep up my spine. What if I was not just fighting her? What if I was facing the very essence of despair itself? I needed to know more, and the deeper I went, the more unsettling discoveries I made. The shadows flickered, seeming to dance with glee. I couldn't shake the feeling of eyes watching me, waiting for me to make a mistake. Just then, I heard a loud bang outside. It startled me, shaking the focus I had clung to. I rushed to the window, peering into the black void that stretched beyond. The wind howled again, its voice eerie, as if warning me not to venture outside. The full moon bathed everything in silver light, casting long, creeping shadows that felt alive. I shuddered but drew back from the window, the feeling of dread settling in my stomach. Clara wasn't just a ghost or a shadow. There was something more sinister about her, a darkness that seemed to echo with the pain of lost souls. I returned to the book with a renewed urgency. It discussed rituals, ways to free those trapped by fear. My pulse quickened. What if I could sever Clara's connection to them? But I knew it wouldn't come easy. Each word seemed to vibrate with warning, cautioning me against the power I sought to unleash. With trembling hands, I started gathering the supplies I would need. The candles, herbs, and a mirror. They were now more than mere items. They became my tools for liberation. Each article felt like a weight, a reminder of the battle I was about to face. I arranged everything carefully in front of me, my heart racing. This was my chance, but Clara wouldn't let it happen easily. The light dimmed suddenly, and I felt a rush of cold air sweep through the room. The candles flickered furiously as a chill crept along my neck. I could almost hear Clara's voice whispering, her breath hot against my skin. "You think you're stronger than me?" she taunted, the sound dripping with malice. "Get out!" I shouted, clenching my fists. "You have no power here." The shadows deepened, swirling closer around me, but I felt a fire igniting within. I would not let her win. With everything prepared, I began the ritual, carefully reciting the words I'd memorized. The air grew thick, buzzing with tension. I could feel Clara's rage building, her presence expanding in the room. The shadows rippled as if they were sentient, twisting and slithering in response to my incantation. I could hear her laugh, a haunting melody that sent chills spiraling through me. "You think you can save them? You'll only make it worse." The room shuddered with her anger, and in that moment, fear threatened to consume me, but I pressed on. As I spoke the final words of the spell, A blinding light erupted from the candles. The shadows writhed violently, shrieking as the light pushed against them. For a split second, I felt Clara's power weaken, the shadows shying from the radiance. A thrill of hope surged through me. Maybe I truly could break her hold over those lost souls. But with that flicker of hope came a rush of rage from Clara. The air thickened again as her anger boiled over. "You will pay for this," she screeched, her voice morphing into something monstrous. The shadows lurched toward me, twisted faces forming in the dark, each whispering my deepest fears. "Stay away," I shouted, forcing the light forward again. The vision of Clara's wrath blurred my surroundings, saturating everything in terror. I focused on the binding incantation, pouring all my energy into the words, hoping against hope that it would be enough to contain her. Suddenly, the shadows thickened into a mass, closing in on me like a tidal wave, and I felt like I was drowning in the darkness. My heart raced, a frantic rhythm as I fought to maintain my grip on the light. "Come back! Return to the light!" I cried out, the words spilling from my mouth like a prayer. And just as I thought all hope was lost, I felt a shift, a pulse of energy surging through my body. The room exploded with light as I focused on the source of my pain. The lost souls Clara had manipulated. Names flooded my mind, each one a reminder of the anguish they had endured. I reached deep within, calling out to them in a desperate plea. "Come back! You are not lost!" The shadows twisted violently, as if Clara was fighting back against my call. Faces emerged, anguished and pleading, trapped between dimensions. "Free us!" they cried in unison, a chorus of despair crashing against my resolve. It echoed in my mind, shattering the fear that enveloped me. With every ounce of strength I had left, I unleashed a wave of light through the room, my voice strong and unwavering. "You are stronger than this fear. Rise up and reclaim your light." The shadows screamed, their voices melding into one furious roar as they began to dissolve, pulled away by the strength of my conviction. In that moment, I saw Clara's form lurching, losing form as desperation consumed her. "No, you can't do this," she shouted, her voice reaching a heartbreaking pitch. I focused even harder, visualizing the light flooding the room, shattering the darkness, reclaiming what was lost. And then a blinding flash engulfed everything. I had unleashed something powerful, something greater than Clara's darkness. The cacophony of voices and shadows enveloped me, whirling like a storm, until with one final surge, they erupted into a brilliant spectrum, illuminating the world around me. In the aftermath, I collapsed to the floor, gasping for breath, the light fading into a warm glow. The air felt lighter, almost serene despite the turmoil I had just faced. I blinked, trying to process what had just happened as shadows retreated into dark corners, leaving behind an echo of relief that whispered through the room. The book lay open in front of me, pages fluttering gently as if breathing once again. I could sense Clara lingering, but she was diminished, her hold weakened by the power I had managed to unleash. Though I could feel her anger and desperation, I knew I had made my first real step in breaking the bond. Yet even as relief washed over me, I couldn't ignore the nagging feeling that this was not truly over. The shadows still lingered, murmuring as they blended with the remnants left behind. I remained vigilant, ready for Clara's next move, knowing she would not rest until she reclaimed what she believed was hers. I took a deep breath, determination flooding through me as I resolved to keep searching for answers. Whatever darkness Clara still wielded, I knew I had the strength to face it. The shadows were not just a part of her. They were a part of me too, and I would learn to harness that power for the light. With that promise in my heart, I began to plan my next move, ready to dive deeper into the book, uncovering more secrets, and preparing for whatever nightmares lay ahead. I was done running. This time, I would harness the shadows and ultimately confront Clara, even if it meant delving into the depths of the darkness itself. I knew I had to keep going, to unravel more of the mystery that surrounded Clara and the shadows that clung to her. The book remained open in front of me, its pages swirling gently like the very essence of darkness within. I could feel the energy pulsing, songs of hidden truths, waiting for me to listen. But now, it wasn't just about Clara. It was about freeing those souls trapped in her torment, lost in shadows like memories forgotten in dark corners. The candlelight flickered as if responding to my resolve, their flames casting long shadows that danced ominously along the wall. I felt an unsettling shift, a reminder that Clara wasn't truly gone. Her presence lingered like a stubborn fog, and as I leaned closer to the book, I couldn't shake the feeling that she was watching me, waiting for my next move. Flipping through the fragile pages, I stumbled upon a passage that chilled me to my core. It detailed an ancient ritual that promised to bind Clara's power permanently, if performed correctly. But with each word I read, I felt an icy dread settle over me. There was a price to pay. It spoke of sacrifices, of offering something of great value to sever the bond. My heart raced, the implication washing over me like a cold wave. What would it cost me? Outside, the wind howled again, shrieking against the walls, as if protesting my thoughts. Shadows flickered with more intensity, and I could hear whispers curling through the air, a cacophony of unheard voices becoming clearer. "You will lose everything," taunted one of the disembodied echoes, chilling me to the bone. I shut my eyes, forcing myself to focus, ignoring the dissonance. Then the air shifted, heavy with the scent of smoke and decay. My heart thudded as I opened my eyes to see a figure standing in the doorway, a silhouette framed against the dim light. The outline was familiar, yet twisted, the face obscured by shadows. It took a slow step forward, and a familiar sense of dread washed over me. "You shouldn't be doing this." Clara's voice slithered through the room, weaving around me like a noose. I backed away, my breath coming in quick gasps. The shadows seemed to tighten, encircling me and tightening like a vice. "I'm not afraid of you," I shouted, though my voice wavered. The figure shifted closer, and I could feel the chill radiating from it, a distortion of both Clara's form and the countless lost souls she had consumed. Suddenly, the room grew darker. The lights flickered violently, and the shadows coalesced, revealing faces that twisted in anguish, their mouths opening in silent screams. Frightened, I glanced around, desperate for a way out, but this was my place now. I had to confront my fears. There was no escaping this nightmare. The walls began to ripple, the very fabric of reality stretching like a canvas being painted with despair. I could hear their sorrowful whispers, begging for release, intensifying until they became a storm of sound. "Help us," they cried. "Free us." They were no longer just victims of Clara. They had become part of the darkness, and the realization pierced through my heart like a dagger. I drew upon the resolve deep within me. I was not powerless. I had faced Clara before and didn't back down. I reached for the book, chanting softly the words I had seen earlier, trying to channel the energy around me, combining it with my own. "You have no hold over me," I asserted, feeling my voice rise above the overwhelming noise of despair. Clara's figure shimmered as if it would dissolve, but she lunged forward, the shadows coiling around her form like serpents. "You think your pathetic spell can save them?" she hissed, each word dripping with venom. "You are bound to me, and you will suffer just as they have." I felt the weight of her words heavy like an anchor. Her presence spread across the room, suffocating me, trying to pull me into her dark embrace. My body trembled, and I fought against the fear swirling within. "I have to believe," I shouted, drawing deeper from the light, willing it to rise up against the advancing darkness. As I stood my ground, I felt a warmth growing in my chest, illuminating the darkness inch by inch. A flicker of hope ignited as I saw the faces of the trapped souls around me, each one filled with despair, but also the yearning for freedom. "Join me," I called to them, my voice rising above the din. "Let's face her together. Break free of her chains." When I spoke those words, I felt the energy shift. The shadows recoiled as the light inhaled, expanding outward, pushing against Clara's desperate figure. The room pulsed as if the very foundation of the world could sense our struggle. I caught a glimpse of their faces, eyes filled with a desperate plea, and it only fueled my resolve. But Clara wasn't going down without a fight. With a screech that echoed through every corner of my mind, she lunged toward me, the shadows swirling into a vortex, each tendril reaching out, trying to drag me back into the dark. "You're nothing but a child playing with things you can't understand," she screeched, a mix of madness and desperation filling her voice. In that moment, the fabric of reality trembled. The lights flickered furiously, and I felt myself teetering on the edge of reality, the balance tipping. This was the moment of choice. As Clara's rage raged, I gathered every scrap of courage and shouted, "I choose light. I choose hope." With those words, I plunged my hands into the energy pooling around me, feeling it coursing through my veins like fire. It was all or nothing. I could hear the souls echoing that choice, their cries morphing into a chorus. "We choose freedom." They joined me in that moment, their presence pushing back against the dark tides swirling around Clara. The shadows screamed in furious defiance, twisting and howling. But the light surged forward, a brilliant wave crashing against the darkness. Clara faltered, her eyes widening in disbelief as the tendrils of shadows began to dissipate around her. For the first time, fear crossed her face. "I can't let you," she shrieked, but it was too late. The energy surged, and with a mighty pulse, a blinding light exploded, engulfing everything in its warmth. I felt the shadows recoil, collapsing under the weight of the light, forced to retreat back into the corners of the room, vanishing like smoke in a breeze. As the light enveloped me, I felt a sense of liberation, the air becoming clearer, breathing life into my battered spirit. Suddenly, I found myself standing in a tranquil space, warmth wrapping around me like a blanket. The whispers of despair faded, replaced by gentle sighs of relief. The faces of the souls flickered around me, more vibrant, no longer bound by fear. "Thank you," they whispered, their voices soft and full of gratitude. "You saved us?" I couldn't help but smile, feeling their warmth wash over me. But as joy filled my heart, a shadow flickered in the periphery, a dark reminder that Clara was still lurking somewhere beyond the reach of light. The warmth of victory was bittersweet, knowing I had only won a battle and not the war. Determined, I picked up the book again, newly aware of the shadows lingering in the corners of my mind. I needed to prepare for Clara's return, to delve deeper into the secrets hidden within its pages. This was not over, and I wouldn't let fear deter me. Clara was still there, waiting outside the light, ready for her next move, and I had to be ready for her. I was just beginning to discover the depths of my own strength, and I knew I would need it as I stepped further into the darkness to protect the light I had managed to reclaim. The darkness was still seductive, still beckoning, but now I understood its nature. The shadows might always whisper, but this time, I would listen closely enough to understand and confront whatever horrors lay ahead. I wasn't alone in this anymore. I had the strength of those souls with me, and as long as I stood with that light, Clara would never truly win. With renewed determination, I began to uncover the pages of the book, not just as a source of fear, but as a guide through the looming night. I would find the path toward my final confrontation, and I wouldn't rest until Clara's grasp on darkness was shattered once and for all. I studied the pages closely, heart racing as I flipped through them for the answers I needed. Each line revealed fragments of forgotten rituals, warnings of ancient powers. But as I read one entry, a cold dread washed over me, making every hair on my arm stand up. It told a dark tale of a soul that had been consumed by the shadows, forever trapped in a limbo between worlds. As I focused on the text, I felt the temperature in the room plunge, my breath coming out in small puffs of fog. I glanced around, feeling an unmistakable presence lurking just beyond the edges of the light. A shiver ran down my spine. There it was again, the faint whisper of Clara's voice, weaving through the shadows. "You can't escape me," she taunted softly, her words echoing like a dark lullaby. I shook my head, pushing the fear aside. I had to stay strong. I returned my focus to the book. The piece I had found seemed important. It described a mirror that could reflect one's true self, including the darkness within. I felt an uneasy pull, as though the mirror itself was calling to me. It promised clarity, but at a cost. A part of me was desperate to find it, wanting to fully understand what I was up against. Without a second thought, I decided to search for this mirror. I gathered my courage and stepped out of my room, leaving the comforting glow of the candles behind. The house felt different, almost alive, as the floorboards creaked under my weight, each step echoing my trepidation. I moved cautiously, unsure of what I might find lurking in the hallways. As I ventured into the living room, the atmosphere shifted again. The shadows danced more frenetic, twisting as if alive with a malevolent energy. I glanced around, searching for any sign of the mirror, my heart pounding like a drum. The walls felt closer, the air thickening as though it were ready to suffocate me. A whisper brushed against my ear, chilling me to the bone. "You'll regret this," it hissed, sending a wave of icy terror coursing through my veins. At the far end of the room, I spotted something gleaming, a faint glint catching the low light. My heart raced as I approached it, feeling irresistibly drawn in. It sat covered in dust, hidden beneath a tattered cloth. As I pulled it back, a large, ornate mirror emerged, its surface reflecting an unsettling image. My own reflection stared back at me, but something was off. The figure in the glass looked pale, eyes wide and full of fear. Yet alongside my reflection lurked a shadow, dark and amorphous, twisting and writhing, as if it were trying to escape from within me. I recoiled at the sight, my heart pounding. "No, that's not me," I gasped, stepping back. Suddenly, the room trembled. The shadows raged, and I felt a deep rumble beneath my feet. The mirror shimmered, the surface rippling as if it were made of water. I dared to take a step closer, entranced by the darkness swirling behind my reflection. The whispers rose in volume, chaotic and frantic. "You can't look away," they warned, the voices blending into a soft chorus of cries. I forced myself to stand firm, resisting the urge to lose myself in their pleading. "I am not afraid of you," I shouted, determined to keep the darkness at bay. But it felt as if the air was closing in, the shadows crawling closer, biting at my ankles with cold fingers. And then I saw it, a flicker in the glass, a glimpse of something vile slithering behind me. I spun around, but found only the emptiness of the room. For a dreadful moment, I was alone, or at least I thought I was. That's when I heard it, an almost playful giggle lurking in the corners, like a malicious spirit watching and waiting. "Clara," I shouted into the darkness, my voice trembling. "Show yourself." The giggle erupted into a cacophony of laughter, chilling the blood in my veins. The shadows thickened, swirling around me. I was ensnared in their web, and I could feel Clara's presence growing stronger, more tangible. "You should be scared, little one," she crooned, her voice wrapping around me like a cold mist. "You're not strong enough to face what you've awakened." I fought to remain composed, gripping the sides of the mirror for support. "I'll break your hold. I'll free those trapped." I could barely recognize my own voice, which now rang with fierce determination. Suddenly, the mirror's surface rippled violently, and I was pulled towards it, drawn in as if it were a vortex. "No!" I cried out, the cold draft gripping me. But my feet refused to move, rooted to the spot as the shadows surged forward. Clara's laughter echoed, a cold mocking sound that sent shivers down my spine. Beyond the mirror, I glimpsed twisted faces, lost souls desperate to escape. They reached out, fingers curling against the surface, eyes pleading for help. The sight pulled at my heart, tearing it apart. "I will save you," I screamed, feeling the pressure building around me. But Clara's figure emerged like a silhouette, dark and swirling, blocking the light from reaching the trapped souls. "They are mine," she shrieked, her voice echoing in the depths of my mind, drowning out all hope. In that instant, I realized Clara had become more than just a ghost. She was fear itself, feeding off despair and anguish. The room shook as the shadows twisted violently around me, and I felt my body being pulled toward the mirror, gravity fighting against me. I gritted my teeth, anchoring my will against the onslaught of fear. No, I refuse to let you take me. I yelled into the encroaching darkness, tapping into the energy that had surged within me earlier. A blinding flash erupted as I focused on the trapped souls, sending a shock wave through the shadows. My heart pounded as I surged the light outward, forcing the darkness to retreat. Clara howled in fury, her shadowy form flickering like a candle caught in a storm. The laughter of the trapped souls morphed into cries of urgency, pushing me to further summon my strength. The mirror trembled at the magnitude of the power rising within me. The trapped souls' faces lit up with hope, and with that flicker, I felt a renewed sense of purpose. I would not give up now. With each whispered prayer and shared pain, I continued to channel my light, directing it toward the mirror. Clara shrieked, her voice twisted and warped. "You will regret this. You think light can vanquish me," she screamed, her shadow lunging toward me. But I wouldn't let her penetrate that hope. I drew in a deep breath, letting the light fill me as I turned my gaze back to the mirror. "Reflect what you truly are," I commanded, feeling a surge of determination. The souls echoed my words, their collective voice rising above Clara's fury, bathing the room in radiant light. With unwavering will, I pushed against the shadows, forcing their hold to break, and the mirror reflected the darkness in its purest form, twisted, distorted, and defeated. Clara's grotesque figure faltered, the shadows swirling unpredictably as the surfaces of those face twisted in horror. "No, this can't be happening," she howled, her rage morphing into fear as the light engulfed the room. As the shadows began to crumble around her, Clara lunged forward, but in that moment, her connection to the darkness shattered. The light surged, illuminating every corner, banishing the despair that had once held dominion over me. Those lost souls started to break free, their faces transformed, glowing with hope. With the mirror reflecting their liberation, Clara's dark form began to dissolve, her laughter replaced by wails of desperation. "You'll never be free of me. I will return," she screamed, but the shadows could no longer sustain her. Through the chaos, light burst forth, radiating with the desperate strength of the lost souls. They reached out, their hands brushing against mine as they escaped the mirror's confines. With one final push, Clara's shadow shrieked in fury before imploding into dark wisps that danced away into the void. And in the aftermath, a silence fell over me. I stood alone, the mirror's surface now quiet, reflecting only my shaken face. The trapped souls were gone, released from Clara's grasp, and I could feel a sense of peace beginning to settle upon the remnants of the darkness that had haunted me. But even as I took a breath, I couldn't shake the feeling of unease creeping through me. I had faced Clara, and in that battle, I'd won, but the shadows still lingered, whispering promises of her return. I needed to remain vigilant. The light had pushed her away, but it wouldn't be long before she found a way back. The book lay beside me, its pages slightly ajar, a reminder of the battle ahead. I could not let my guard down. I walked back to my room, heart heavy with the knowledge that I had not finished yet. There were still secrets waiting to be unveiled, rituals yet to be explored. I would have to face whatever darkness awaited me again. With grim determination, I opened the book once more, ready to dive deep into the arcane wisdom it held. I would uncover everything, and this time, I would prepare for the darkness that would come rising up to meet me. I was ready to confront Clara once and for all. Resolved to uncover the secrets hidden within the book, I took a deep breath and began scanning the pages again. My fingers traced the words, feeling their power vibrating beneath my skin. Each line seemed to pulse with a life of its own, whispering of ancient truths and dark times. But behind every intriguing tale, the oppressive weight of dread lurked, reminding me that I was not safe yet. As I focused on the text, a chill traveled down my spine, and I suddenly felt as if I was not alone in the room. I glanced over my shoulder, half expecting Clara to leap from the shadows, but only darkness met my gaze. I shook my head and forced myself to return to the text. Focus, I told myself. You can't let fear consume you again. I noticed a passage describing a ritual, a way to protect oneself from the shadows. My heart raced as I read about the materials needed: salt, a mirror, and a candle. It sounded simple enough, yet the enormity of it anchored terror in my gut. The words spoke of a barrier against the creatures that lurked in the darkness, but I had to gather the materials quickly. Clara would be back. I hastily searched my room, adrenaline pumping through my veins. I found a half-used box of salt in the kitchen, and I grabbed a small candle, barely clinging to life. With those few things in hand, I sneaked back into the living room, my heart racing like a drum, and set everything out in front of the now dormant mirror. As I arranged the items, I noticed the air thickening around me again. Shadows flickered along the walls, whispering menacingly. I could hear indistinct mutterings, each word threaded with malice. My breath became shallow. "It's just the wind," I muttered softly, trying to convince myself. But even as I said it, a heavy weight settled in my stomach. I lit the candle and placed it in the center of the salt circle, feeling warmth radiate around me. For a moment, the light pushed back against the encroaching darkness, creating a small sanctuary in the gloom. I closed my eyes, focused on my breathing, and began to recite the incantation from the book. As I spoke the words, the shadows roared in protest, swirling violently around me. The candle flickered, almost extinguishing before it flared back to life. I felt a push against the sphere of salt, as if something was trying to pierce through the barrier I was forming. My heart raced. Every beat echoed in my ears. I pressed on, determined to finish the incantation. By the light that gives me strength, I call upon the protection of the ancients. I shouted, my voice firm but trembling. The shadows screeched, a cacophony of tormented cries rising up in reply. The air grew thicker, and I could almost see Clara's shadow lurking just beyond the barrier, twisting and writhing in anguish. Suddenly, the candle flickered violently, and the flame shot up dangerously high, casting monstrous figures on the walls around me. I squinted through the light, searching for a sign of Clara, knowing the moment she found a way in, everything could change. I could feel her presence creeping closer, a chill washing over me, stealing the warmth from my limbs. Then, without warning, the mirror began to tremble. My heart dropped as it rattled violently, and I feared it would shatter. A loud crack echoed through the room, reverberating off the walls. I gasped and took a step back, unable to maintain my focus amid the chaos. With a deafening crash, the glass shattered, scattering fragments across the floor like rain. From the shards, a dark mist began to seep out, swirling together to form a shape that began to materialize. My breath caught as I realized it was Clara, emerging from the remnants of the mirror, her figure more sinister than before, eyes glowing with a malicious light. "You thought you could banish me? Foolish child," she hissed, her voice slithering like a snake. The shadows pulsed around her, spiraling towards me like living tendrils eager to invade my sanctuary. Panic surged through me. I couldn't let her in. I had to hold on to the light. Desperate, I grabbed the salt and flung it toward Clara, chanting louder, hoping to reclaim the protective barrier. "Get back!" I yelled, as the white grains glinted in the candlelight, creating a momentary halt in her advance. But Clara only laughed, her voice echoing with darkness. "Do you think your salt can keep me away? You've only made me stronger." The shadows around her thickened into a swirling vortex, a storm of chaos that threatened to consume everything. My skin prickled with fear, and I felt the weight of dread wrapping around me like a chain. I stumbled backward as the air crackled with energy, shadows jarring against my senses. "I won't let you take me," I shouted, my voice cracking, but deep down, I could feel that fear gnawing at my resolve. Suddenly, Clara lunged forward, her shadowy fingers reaching out towards me. I braced myself for an impact as the darkness clawed at the very edge of my salt barrier. It nearly collapsed under her weight, but I held my ground, heart pounding so loudly I feared it might burst. The candle flickered wildly, shades of light dancing across the walls, illuminating Clara's twisted features. I leaned into the light, readying myself for a final stand. Clenching my fists, I chanted one last incantation I had memorized from the book, calling upon the lingering energy within me, tapping into the hope I felt for those lost souls. Then, with every ounce of strength I could muster, I pushed the light outward. The room erupted in a brilliant glow, the shadows recoiling violently against the onslaught. Clara screamed, a sound that pierced through the air and gripped my heart with despair. "Your light will fail," she bellowed, but her voice was filled with a mix of anger and fear. The darkness began to swirl away from me, retreating from the brilliance that I had summoned. In that moment of pure determination, I felt those lost souls whispering, their voices mingling with mine, urging me forward. I saw the glimmers of their faces, etched in my mind, yearning for release. With a final roar, I unleashed the light, shattering the remnants of Clara's darkness once and for all. The candle flared into a dazzling flame, illuminating every corner like the dawn breaking after a long night. Shadows were forced to retreat, vanishing into the depths of the room, leaving only echoes of Clara's screams. I gasped, collapsing to the ground, the weight of the darkness lifting, but an unsettling feeling settled in as I gazed around. Despite my victory, I couldn't shake the sense that this wasn't over. Clara was gone, at least for now, but darkness had a way of lurking in the corners, waiting for an opportunity to return. I understood that I'd have to strengthen my defenses and learn from this terrifying experience. As I began to rise, I noticed that the remnants of the shattered mirror glimmered softly on the floor. I couldn't help but feel drawn to them. Caution brewed within me, yet curiosity urged me closer. What remnants of Clara had been left behind? I knelt down, picking up a small shard of glass. As I turned it over, I caught a glimpse of a swirling shadow still caught in the edges. My heart raced as I realized that Clara's essence lingered, even in defeat. For a moment, I stared into the shard, wondering just what sort of power I might still be able to harness. Then, the shadows in the room flickered in response, swirling back, whispering their dark promises. "You can still join us," they beckoned softly, an offer that both terrified and intrigued me. I clenched the shard tightly, uncertainty flooding my mind. What did this mean for me? The struggle was over, but it felt like I had only scratched the surface of the dangers that lay ahead. As my pulse slowed, I made a silent vow to uncover the truth behind Clara, to understand the darkness that resonated both within me and in the world I had stepped into. With newfound determination, I steadied myself and turned back to the book. What knowledge might it hold that could prepare me for the future? I knew I had details to learn, shadows to confront, and spell to master. I promised myself, no matter what, I wouldn't let the darkness win. I was ready to dive deeper into the mystery, willing to fight back against whatever Clara had to unleash next. It was a battle for my soul, and I would not retreat. As I stared at the shard of glass, I felt a mix of fear and curiosity. The darkness seemed to wrap around me again, creeping in slowly. I had just defeated Clara, or so I thought, but the air still buzzed with tension. I could almost taste the remnants of her energy swirling around, calling out to me in the shadows. With my heart thudding louder than a drum, I set the shard down on a nearby table. The glow from the candle flickered, casting long shadows across the walls, making shapes that seemed to dance. I shook my head, dismissing those unsettling thoughts. I needed to focus on understanding the knowledge hidden in the book. I flipped through the pages, the ancient paper crisp under my fingers. The further I read, the more the words began to intertwine with my thoughts. One line caught my attention. The remnants of the past can bind you to the darkness, A chill ran down my spine as I thought about the glass shard. What if Clara wasn't permanently gone? Suddenly, a cold gust swept through the room, extinguishing the candle's flame, plunging me into darkness. Panic surged, and I fumbled in the gloom, trying to relight the candle. My hands shook as I struck a match against the rough surface, hoping for a spark to chase away the night. Each tick of the match echoed in my ears, amplifying my anxiety. Just when I thought despair would consume me, I saw the faintest glow. It flickered back to life, but as the flame flickered, I noticed a shadow moving in the corner of my eye. I turned sharply, squinting into the dark, my heart racing. "Clara," I whispered, my voice shaky, but silence greeted me, wrapping the room in an eerie shroud. I could feel her presence like a chill hanging in the air. I stood frozen, unwilling to move. That's when a soft giggle echoed around me, light and whispery, but filled with malice. It bounced off the walls, digging into my mind. I covered my ears to block out the laughter. "Leave me alone," I shouted, trying to sound brave, but my voice trembled with fear. The shadows twisted, forming dark shapes that seemed to reach out to me, grasping at my ankles. I stumbled back, nearly tripping over my own feet. The fear clawed at my throat, threatening to pull me under. Then, the shadows receded just enough for me to breathe again. But with relief came a heavy weight in my stomach. I knew Clara was using this moment to regroup. I hurried to grab the shard again, this time feeling the cold glass beneath my fingers. Maybe it could help me understand what she wanted, or how she had managed to latch onto my soul. As I examined the shard, something strange happened. The glass began to hum softly, a whisper of energy sliding through my fingers. Unsettled, I looked into its surface. It reflected not just my face, but the shadows lurking behind me. Dark, contorted figures shifted and twitched, as if they were alive. "What are you?" I murmured, transfixed by the imagery in the shard. It felt like a portal inviting me to step deeper, to explore the darkness that I had only just begun to understand. The shadows behind me writhed, whispering secrets that tickled the edges of my consciousness. My pulse raced again as I clenched the shard, unsure whether to dive into the darkness or flee. Suddenly, a loud slam echoed through the house, shaking the walls. I spun around, heart hammering. "Hello," I called out, but my voice sounded small, lost in the oppressive quiet. The air grew heavier, and I caught a glimpse of movement, a shadow darting just beyond the doorway. Curiosity and fear warred inside me as I moved toward it. With hesitant steps, I edged closer to the hall. Each creak of the floor sent a fresh wave of terror rippling through me. I peered into the darkened corridor. It stretched ominously, the dim light from the living room barely illuminating the path ahead. Just then, I heard it again, soft footsteps echoing, a gentle tap-tap-tap against the wooden floorboards. "No," I breathed, realizing I wasn't alone. I wanted to turn back, but something compelled me to inch forward, drawn deeper into the unknown. The sound grew louder, sharpening with every careful step. I gripped the shard tightly, suddenly wishing I had a stronger weapon against whatever lay in wait. Shadows danced along the walls, morphing into unsettling shapes that twisted my thoughts into knots. I could feel Clara's cold fingers creeping closer, seeping into the cracks of my consciousness, urging me to give in to the darkness. The hallway felt endless, darkness consuming every inch. I could hear my heart pounding, but the sound of the footsteps began to fade. In that moment of stillness, a sliver of dread sliced through me. This silence was worse than the noise. I stepped forward, the shadows swirling closely around me, and I felt the weight of 1,000 eyes watching, waiting for me to falter just for a moment. Then, from the corner of my eye, I caught a flicker of movement. A shadowy figure appeared at the far end, standing eerily still, almost blending into the wall. My breath caught in my throat as I squinted into the dimness, trying to make out its features. "Who's there?" I called out, voice steady despite my trembling hands. The figure didn't respond. Instead, it began to glide toward me, smooth and fluid, like smoke rising through the air. Each step sent chills racing down my spine, and I felt the urge to run rise to the surface. But I was frozen, my feet glued in place. As it drew closer, I could see its face, twisted and contorted with grief and rage. It looked like those lost souls I had seen in my vision, but molded into something darker, something I could barely comprehend. It exuded a palpable aura of despair that wrapped around me, squeezing the breath out of my lungs. "What do you want?" I managed to croak, trying to break through the thick silence that surrounded us. It stopped just a few feet away, its eyes bore into mine, filled with an indescribable longing. I felt a tug in my chest, pain flooding in. Then, in a whisper that chilled me to the bone, it said, "You must help us." The words echoed through the hall, reverberating in my skull. "Set us free." Confusion surged within me. Set them free? I looked into the creature's eyes, seeing the sorrow and agony. They weren't just remnants of Clara's darkness. They were trapped souls begging for my help. "Who are you?" I asked, trying to keep the tremor out of my voice. "Why are you here?" A soft wind swept through the corridor, rattling the walls. "We are the lost," it moaned, a sound so full of sorrow that I couldn't help but feel my heart wrench in response. "Clara has taken so much from us. We need your light to escape." The weight of their plea pressed down on me. They needed help. Yes, but could I trust them? I remembered the power Clara wielded and how close she came to consuming me. What if these desperate souls were a trap? What if they were merely another facet of her darkness, luring me into a snare? My mind raced as I backed away from the shadowy figure. "I can't. I don't know how," I shouted, my voice cracking with the weight of my fear. The shadows began to swirl angrily around me, whispering sweet temptations of surrender. "Do not give in," the figure urged, reaching out a shadowy hand. "Only you can unite us and break the chains." The desperation lit a fire within me, igniting my determination. "You must find the mirror, release us, and obliterate Clara's power." As those last words spilled from its lips, the shadows thickened across the corridor, threatening to shut me in. Despite my fear, I could feel the truth in its words. I wanted to break free. I wanted to help. Summoning every ounce of courage, I gripped the shard fiercely and took a deep breath. "All right," I whispered, feeling a newfound strength surge within me. "I will help you." The figure's eyes brightened, and for a flickering moment, it transformed into something almost beautiful, glimmers of hope shining through its grief. "Thank you," it echoed, the shadows pulsing in response. Suddenly, the room felt lighter, an opportunity dancing just beyond my reach. But the darkness began to swirl tighter, vicious tendrils reaching for me, clawing into my skin. Clara was returning, sensing my defiance. I could feel her rage pouring through the walls, crawling closer with every heartbeat. With frantic urgency, I turned toward the light spilling from the living room, racing down the hall that seemed to stretch endlessly before me. "I have to get the mirror," I thought, desperation fueling my every step. The figure faded momentarily, its voice echoing in my mind like a distant chant. "Find the mirror. Unite the light." I burst into the room, panting heavily, every nerve screaming to escape the darkness that pursued me. I scanned around for a way to retrieve everything I needed. My eyes landed on the remnants of the shattered mirror scattered over the floor. In the midst of that chaos, the light still shimmered faintly like embers waiting to ignite once more. I dropped to my knees, gathering those shards as if they were precious treasures, feeling their raw energy pulse against my skin. The whispers intensified again, a chorus of shadows clamoring at the edges of my mind, powerful and enticing, but I pushed those thoughts aside. I had to focus. I formed a circle, carefully placing the fragments around me, snatching up pieces that sparkled with the glint of light. The shadows threatened to engulf the room, draping their heavy cloak of darkness over me. Yet I pressed on, reciting the incantation from the book once more, my voice a fierce whisper rising above the chaos. By the light of many, I command the dark to flee, I chanted, feeling the energy swell within me. The shards began to glow, reflecting shards of light that danced across the walls like stars breaking through the night sky. But then Clara's shadow surged into the room, darker than before, twisting and howling with rage. "You think you can save them?" she screamed, her voice slicing through the air like ice. My heart raced, the darkness wrapping around me, threatening to choke out my light. "Leave me!" I yelled, fear mixing with resolve. I refused to yield to her wrath. With renewed determination, I launched myself into the chant again, louder now, letting the light build around me. The shadows recoiled, screeching with fury, but just as I felt the strength growing, the shards exploded, illuminating the room in brilliant light. I could see lost souls rising from the shadows, ethereal and shimmering, their chains dissolving as they broke free from the darkness. With a final burst of energy, Clara lunged toward me, her anger manifesting into a whirlwind of shadows. "You will never escape," she shouted, fury mingling with despair. But within that whirl, I spotted the lost souls, reaching out toward me, their pleas echoing in my mind. "Soul of light, unite with me," I shouted, launching myself deeper into the chant, guiding the souls back toward the light I had harnessed. With every ounce of willpower, every ounce of hope, I felt the darkness begin to shatter. The light engulfed everything, blinding and beautiful, drowning out the shadows as Clara's howl filled the air, echoing in terror. The room erupted into a flash of brilliance, a kaleidoscope of light that shattered the chains binding the souls. They rose up, swirling around me, their ethereal forms filling me with warmth. I felt Clara's hold break as she dissolved into nothingness, lost to the shadows forever. As the brilliance faded, I sank to my knees, gasping for breath. I had faced the darkness and won, but I knew the battle wouldn't truly end here. There were whispers still lingering in the air, unexplained secrets waiting to be unearthed. The shards of the mirror lay around me, a reminder of the struggle I had just endured. I could feel something new beginning. An adventure was waiting just beyond the remnants of my fear. The lost souls hovered above, their forms flickering like candles, a warm glow illuminating the edges of my vision. But deep down, I sensed a new kind of beauty and truth emerging from the darkness. I would have to confront more shadows, more secrets, and learn how to embrace the light within. With newfound resolve, I promised to uncover the mystery that bound them, to hold firm against the call of the darkness that lingered just beyond the horizon. Because every story doesn't end, it simply prepares for the next chapter waiting to unfold. And I was ready for whatever came next. With newfound resolve, I promised to uncover the mystery that bound them, to hold firm against the call of the darkness that lingered just beyond the horizon. As the last of Clara's dark presence faded away, silence filled the room. I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of what I'd accomplished settling over me. But even in this fragile moment of victory, I sensed something lurking at the edges of my mind, a warning. The rest of the room began to shift, shadows curling in on themselves. It was like the air had thickened, pressing down around me. I remembered the soft giggle I had heard earlier, and a shiver ran down my spine. Suddenly, the temperature dropped. I could see my breath misting in front of me, swirling like a ghostly reminder of the chilling darkness. It felt suffocating. The remaining lost souls flickered around me, their sparkling forms tauntingly close but out of reach. "What's happening?" I whispered to them, feeling a knot twist in my stomach. One of the shadows spoke, its voice barely a whisper. "You've done well." But Clara was only the beginning. The darkness will always seek to reclaim what it lost. Panic surged through me as I realized Clara's hold on the shadows wasn't just gone. It had transformed into something else, something more sinister. I grasped the pieces of the shattered mirror, hoping to gather strength from them. The shards still glowed softly, but that warmth felt distant now. I turned to find that the room was no longer the familiar space I had fought so hard to protect. The walls seemed to breathe, pulsating with a life of their own. They were closing in on me. With every flicker of light, I noticed unsettling shapes emerging, grotesque forms forming from darkness. Their features shifted and blurred, unable to define themselves, but I could sense the malice in them. Each creak of the floorboards felt like they were waking up, inching closer and closer. "Stay back!" I yelled, my voice filled with urgency. I backed away, feeling the panic unfurl inside me. "I won't let you take me." But the shadows didn't respond. They twisted together, forming one larger figure that loomed over me. I could hardly breathe. It felt like a weight pressing down on my chest. The figure was a mass of darkness, an embodiment of fear, and just as it began to take on a more distinct shape, I saw Clara's face flicker in and out, twisted with rage and sorrow. "Foolish child," it whispered, its voice echoing with a haunting familiarity. "You have only delayed the inevitable." The shadows surged forward, enveloping me in a cocoon of cool darkness. My heart raced as I struggled against the growing weight. Once again, I was falling into despair, but something strong pushed against the encroaching darkness, a memory of my own light. Desperately, I focused on the glimmer of hope I had felt before, a warmth rising within me again. I had faced Clara, had broken free from her grip. I thrusted my hand forward, clutching the shard tight, as if it was my last lifeline. "You will not claim me," I shouted with intensity, the words spilling out. A shockwave echoed through the shadows, throwing the figure back momentarily. The room felt electrified, the air crackling as the remaining light swirled around me. I could see the lost souls, their forms glowing brighter as I pulled from the energy within. But I could feel the fear rising again, clawing at my resolve, whispering doubts that made me question my strength. "Remember us," they murmured, their voices blending into a hypnotic rhythm. "We are the key." I clenched my teeth, shaking my head to fight off the creeping dread. "I won't forget," I promised, my resolve hardening. I had to embrace their energy, weave it into my fight against this resurgence of darkness. The shadows roared, their fury sending shivers down my spine. "You think you can banish us?" Clara's face distorted, the shadows writhing with anger. It shifted, becoming more grotesque with each second, its mouth curling into a cruel smile. "You will never escape this torment." Then, one of the lost souls surged next to me, glowing brighter than before. "The mirror will be your weapon," it urged. "You must put together the pieces of your past and confront the darkness that remains." With a rush of adrenaline, I bent down and gathered the shards again, feeling their coolness against my fingers. I could feel the energy pulsing between them, waiting for me to unite them into something powerful. Focusing intently, I imagined the mirror reforming. The shards began to hover around me, the light converging as though called by an invisible force. Clara's dark figure twisted in frustration, unable to prevent my reclaiming of power. "Stop!" she screamed, her voice clawing at my resolve. "You cannot defeat me that easily." But I ignored her cries. I continued to concentrate, pulling every shred of light and hope from the shards. I could feel the energy swirling around me like a tempest, merging together to form a shimmering mirror before me. Suddenly, a blinding light filled the room. I closed my eyes against the brilliance, feeling the force sweep through the shadows like a cleansing thunderstorm. When I opened my eyes, the mirror was complete, radiating a pure light that pierced the darkness. In it, I saw reflections of the lost souls standing beside me, filled with hope and determination. Together, they whispered, "We can break the chains." With that, I raised the mirror toward Clara, my heart roaring with courage. "You have tormented enough souls," I shouted, the energy around me crackling with electricity. "You will not win." Clara's figure buckled as I directed the light at her. The shadows screamed, and the very fabric of the darkness unspooled around me. I could see the faces of those trapped within the darkness, their eyes wide with fear. Then their expressions shifted, morphing into expressions of pure hope. I felt their strength melding with mine as the mirror pulsed, light bursting forth with a force I could scarcely comprehend. Clara writhed, trying to obscure my vision, but I was undeterred. The light engulfed everything around me, becoming a swirling vortex of cleansing energy. "Feel the light!" I cried out, pouring everything I had into the mirror's reflection. Shadows shrieked in agony, darting away from the brilliance that chased them. The room shook, reverberating like it was about to split open. Suddenly, Clara's form began to dissolve, her shrieks weaving into the air like a ghostly lament. "No, this isn't over," she screeched, her voice fading into a haunting echo that lingered, slithering through the gaps in the walls. Just then, I felt a tug on my heart. The lost souls surged forward, their light consuming mine. "Thank you," they cried out, voices lilting in unison, wrapping around me like a warm embrace. I watched in awe as they were uplifted, escaping the clutches of darkness, leaving behind Clara's remnants like ashes scattering in the wind. Yet, a gnawing sense of dread simmered beneath the surface. As I stood clutching the shard, the remnants of darkness whispered, calling to the deepest fears within me. "You have won today," they hissed, their voices chilling and sweet at the same time. "But we will return. There is always another shadow." A chill crept up my spine, and I felt a haunting presence reshape itself in the air around me. I had driven away one darkness, but another waited in the wings, biding its time until I would falter. As the last echoes faded, I stood there, trembling but resolved, standing amidst the remnants of the shadows that had once consumed me. I glanced at the mirror, its fragments glowing. Faintly now, a reminder of the fight I had just endured. But the darkness wasn't over. It was merely taking a moment to regroup. I took a deep breath, knowing I had no choice but to prepare for what lay ahead. I had uncovered one mystery and opened the door to another. I had faced Clara and emerged stronger, but I also understood that the journey wouldn't end here. I had to seek out the darkness, face the shadows that lingered unseen, and find a way to combat the fear that threatened to creep back into my heart. I took a step forward, certain I wasn't alone. The lost souls had vanished, but their whispers remained in my ears like a guiding light. "Keep going," they urged softly, bolstering my resolve. "You are the keeper of hope. You must guard it fiercely." With that, I steeled myself for whatever awaited me in the darkness, my heart pounding as I prepared to confront the unseen terror lurking beyond the veil of shadows, knowing that I would face whatever came next with unwavering courage. As the light from the mirror started to dim, I turned towards the doorway, my heart racing. I stepped through, feeling the sudden chill as I crossed the threshold. The atmosphere seemed to shift instantly, a heavy feeling wrapping around me like an old, threadbare blanket. It smelled damp, like old wood and mold, and the shadows seemed to crawl along the floor, slinking away from the faint light surrounding me. With each cautious step, I felt the air grow denser, pressing in as if something was waiting, lurking just beyond my sight. The walls closed in, and I hesitated at the edge of the living room, the flickering shadows dancing in the corners of my vision. A sound broke the thick silence, a soft rustle that sent chills running down my spine. It was like a whisper, barely audible, but it felt like it was right next to my ear. I spun around, scanning the room for any sign of movement. My hand tightened around my shard, the glow from the pieces flickering ever so slightly, as if responding to my fear. "Show yourself," I shouted, my voice breaking the stillness. The rustling stopped immediately, and for a moment, I wondered if I'd been imagining it. Just as I turned to leave, an unsettling laugh pierced the air, a deep, echoing sound that reverberated through my bones. I froze, my breath catching in my throat. I felt it then, a chilling presence sweeping across the room, wrapping around me like icy fingers. My instincts screamed to run, but my feet refused to budge. "Who's there?" I managed to whisper, forcing my voice to sound steady. The only response was the fading echo of that disturbing laugh. My heart raced as I took one cautious step back, and that's when I noticed the shadows pooling at my feet, thick and palpable, like a living entity eager to engulf me. In a flash, I saw a figure materialize behind the couch, barely illuminated by the fading light. It was smaller than Clara had been, but equally terrifying. The thing seemed to shift and blur like smoke, eyes glowing with an eerie blue light that pierced through the gloom. There was something unsettling about its smile, a grin that stretched too wide for its face, revealing jagged teeth that glistened in the dim light. "Come now, don't be afraid," it drawled, its voice a sickly sweet whisper that clawed at my sanity. "I'm not here to hurt you." Yet, the words wrapped around me, tightening like a noose. Panic surged through me, my body screaming to escape. "What do you want?" I demanded, trying to maintain a facade of bravery. The creature slithered closer, moving with an unnatural grace, shadows swirling in its wake. "I only seek what was lost," it purred, tilting its head as it watched me with predatory interest. "Your fear, your despair, it's so delicious." My pulse quickened as I realized that it fed off fear, drawing strength from the terror it instilled in me. "Get away from me," I shouted, raising the shard high, summoning the flickering light that still resided within it. The creature recoiled, but did not retreat, the shadows around it writhing in anger. "What a brave little thing you are," it mocked, a low giggle escaping its lips. "But you can't hope to shine your little light forever." The room seemed to darken around me, corners sharpening and shadows stretching like claws reaching out to snatch me away. I could feel a swirl of hopelessness creeping in, threatening to pull me down into its depths. The shadowy figure edged closer, a hunger gleaming in its eyes. I gripped the shard tighter, seeking reassurance in its glow, but doubts flooded my mind, gnawing at my courage. "Face the truth," it hissed, moving closer until it was only a few feet away. "You're all alone. No one can help you now." I shook my head, trying to block out its words. The memory of the lost souls flickered through my mind, their hopeful faces urging me to fight. I couldn't crumble now. "No!" I shouted, attempting to sound defiant. "You're wrong. I am not alone." With that declaration, I stepped forward, forcing the shard into the path of the creature's dark tendrils. I felt a surge of energy, brighter and more potent than before. The creature grimaced, darkness recoiling as the light flared brighter. "You think that trinket can save you?" It spat, but now there was a hint of uncertainty in its voice. I could almost taste its fear, and it only fueled my determination further. I pushed the shard closer, feeling warmth radiate from it, gathering strength from the souls I had freed. "You are nothing," I exclaimed, pouring my energy into the shard. The darkness melted away, retreating from the encroaching light, though it battered back stubbornly, like a tide clawing against the shore. But just as I thought I had gained the upper hand, the creature lunged forward to close the distance between us, shadows forming blades that sliced through the air. I barely dodged to the side just in time, feeling the chill of its presence graze past me. A heart-stopping dread surged into my chest. Suddenly, a shrill laugh erupted around me, echoing off the walls, wrapping me in an unsettling cocoon of sound. "You think light can banish me?" I was born in the chaos of shadows. The response was disorienting, making it hard to figure out where it was coming from. It felt as if it surrounded me, echoes coming from every direction. "Light is weak. It flickers and dies." The creature's voice grew louder, more aggressive, feeding on my fear. "You will see. I will show you darkness. I will show you despair." I fought back against that taunting voice that tainted my mind, charging the shard with every ounce of strength I had. My heart raced wildly, but I couldn't back down now. As the shadows began to swirl violently around the room, I raised the shard with renewed determination. "This is not the end," I cried out, my voice rising above the chaos. I focused on that light, letting it surge forth like a beacon illuminating the encroaching darkness. "Shine." The word tore from my lips as a burst of radiant energy erupted from the shard, illuminating the room in blinding light. The shadows screamed, a cacophony of horrid sounds blending into one. I could feel their anger and despair crashing against the walls, but I embraced the light, allowing it to wash over me and push back against the dark figure. "I will not be consumed," I shouted, forcing back the creeping dread that threatened to drown me. The light exploded outward, illuminating every corner of the room, shattering the lingering shadows with a brilliant radiance. The creature shrieked, the sound piercing through the air like glass breaking. I felt the walls, vibrating as if the very foundation was shaking under the force of our struggle. I surged forward, intent on breaking this dark being's hold, feeling the warmth radiating from within me. Just as I lunged toward it, the creature lashed out, shadows wrapping around my ankles and pulling me down. I stumbled, falling to the ground, the light flickering dangerously. Panic gripped me as I struggled against the dark tendrils, but they felt like a vice, squeezing tightly. I gritted my teeth, fighting to focus the light, desperate to stand my ground against the encroaching darkness. Every instinct urged me to give in, to lose myself to defeat, but the thought of the lost souls propelled me forward. "No!" I gasped, wrenching my leg free, rising to my feet once more. I could see the creature wavering, unnerved by my tenacity. Its glowing eyes flickered, the confidence draining from its face, as if my defiance was unraveling its very essence. With a determined shout, I raised the shard once again. "You will not take me. I am light. I am hope," and thrust it forward, aiming straight at the heart of the shadowy figure. The energy swirling around erupted into a flash of brilliance, a tempest of light smashing into the dark essence before me. The creature howled, the sound echoing around the room in an agonizing wail that reverberated in my bones. I could see its form stretching, twisting as the light drew it in, unraveling its grip on the darkness around me. I felt a rush of triumph, a surge of hope flooding my veins. Maybe this was it. Maybe I could finally defeat this horror. But before the shadows fully dispersed, the creature let out one last desperate plea, a cacophony of anguished voices crying out in unison. "You can never be rid of me. I am eternal. I will always rise again." The last remnants of that darkness curled around me, squeezing tight, and for a brief moment, I felt real dread clawing back into my heart as I grappled with the reality of its words. But even as fear threatened to pull me down, my light blazed brighter. In a frenzy, I compelled the shard to push through the residual darkness, each word beckoning the light to fill the void. I was not alone. I carried the hope of those I fought for, and I would bring them peace. The room erupted into a final burst of sound, the clash of light and dark, a blinding force grappling against the shadows, illuminating everything with pure radiance. And in that moment, I knew I would never give in. In a frenzy, I compelled the shard to push through the residual darkness, each word beckoning the light to fill the void. I was not alone. I carried the hope of those I fought for, and I would bring them peace. But just as the light seemed to swallow the darkness, the air began to thicken around me. I felt a sudden drop in temperature, like ice racing through my veins. The room shifted, walls closing in, making my skin crawl. A low whisper wound through the darkness, weaving in and out of the echoing silence like a haunting lullaby. "Let me in," the voice hissed, sweet and sinister, creeping under my skin. Panic struck me at the sound. I turned to spot the source, but the shadows danced too fast, and I could only see vague shapes moving just beyond the edges of my vision. It felt like hands were reaching out, taunting me with the chilling caress of despair. "What do you want?" I shouted, trying to keep my voice steady, but I could hear the tremor beneath the surface. The whispers grew louder, filling my ears with maddening promises. They flicked through my mind, turning my thoughts cold and bitter. "Join us," they urged enticingly. Shaking my head, I took a step back, feeling the shards in my hand pulsate with warmth. It was my only guard against the creeping chill. "Leave me alone," I yelled, summoning every ounce of strength I had. I swung the shard around me like a weapon, but it felt like the light was being consumed by the oppressive dark. Just then, an icy breeze swept through the room, extinguishing the light around me. The glow from the shard dimmed, leaving me in near total darkness. A scream caught in my throat as dread penetrated my very core. The chilling sensation slithered over my skin, leaving goosebumps in its wake. "Please," I whispered to myself, gripping the shard like a lifeline as my heart thundered wildly in my chest. "You have to hold on." The voice returned, clearer now, dripping with malice. "You think you can resist? You can't, little one. You belong to the shadows." My heart raced faster as I felt the presence tightening around me. It was everywhere, a suffocating wave, more alive than I had ever experienced. Trying to breathe through the anxiety, I closed my eyes momentarily, shutting out the darkness. I thought of the light, the hope that had sparked within me, a flicker of warmth I couldn't let go of. But with each breath, the chilling realization set in. What if the hope was gone forever? I opened my eyes to see swirling shadows pouring forth from the corners of the room, creeping over the floor like thick fog. The tendrils curled around my feet, pulling at me, tugging me toward the ever-enveloping darkness. I stumbled back in horror as their grip tightened. "Please no," I gasped, looking around desperately for any way out. My fingers brushed against the shard, and I drew strength from it, chanting the words that had secured my strength before. The light flickered weakly, pulses of white breaking through the shadows momentarily. "Go away," I shouted, feeling the energy ebb and flow with every syllable. But the shadows didn't falter. They enveloped me completely, and I felt like I was drowning in a river of despair. Suddenly, a figure emerged from the thick darkness, moving with deliberate slowness. I squinted against the dimness to make out what it was, but my breath hitched in my throat as it drew closer. It looked like a person, or at least it was trying to resemble one. Its features were distorted, eyes wide and hollow, skin an unsettling shade of gray. It smiled, but the grin was lopsided and stretched too wide, the edges cracking in a mocking way. I felt the energy draining from me, like the light from the shard was being siphoned into this creature. "You're just like us now," it hissed, its voice like fingernails scraping against glass. "You feel it, don't you? The darkness calls to you." The shadows shifted around me, and I felt more than saw them moving, swirling in a vortex, pulling me deeper into their depths. "No, this can't be real," I shouted, trying to push back against the wave of despair. But with every breath, I felt my strength waning. It was like the air had become heavy, thick with a fog that obscured my thoughts, making everything feel futile. The creature stepped closer, its face hovering just inches from mine, the dark eyes boring into my soul. "You don't have to fight it. Just give in. It will be easier." I squeezed my eyes shut, trying to block it out, but the urge to surrender was like a drug, seeping into every crevice of my mind. Voices surged within me, luring me to join them in the shadows that danced in an enticing rhythm. The creature's breath was cold on my face, and I could almost feel the pull of the shadows wrapping around me, blooming like a flower, promising warmth and acceptance. "You're one of us now," it crooned softly. "No," I yelled, the defiance erupting from deep within. The flicker of light connecting me to the shard revived its glow, brightening with renewed fervor. "I will never be one of you," the shadows shrieked, recoiling from the pulse of my defiance. Panicked, I drew the shard up, feeling the energy surge within me as the light expanded outwards like a beacon. The dark entity faltered, its grotesque smile faltering for the first time. I didn't wait for it to recover. "I will fight," I shouted, sending the light surging toward the figure. The room trembled around me as energy erupted from the shard, illuminating everything in a blinding radiance. The creature shrieked, and I could see it start to disintegrate, the darkness dissolving at the edges like mist under the morning sun. Fresh tendrils of shadows lashed out, but the light held them at bay, pushing back against the overwhelming force. "No, this isn't over," it howled, the plaintive wail echoing off the walls before being swallowed in the brilliance surrounding me. But as the light began to break through, something else stirred in the darkness, an unsettling shift that made my stomach drop. New shadows arose from nowhere, swirling and intertwining at the edges, gathering strength where the first creature had faltered. I could almost feel their excitement, a hungry anticipation that made my skin crawl. I couldn't let my guard down. I felt a new darkness unfurling behind me, creeping toward me with claws poised, ready to snatch away my hard-earned victory. The hairs on the back of my neck stood on end as another figure began to take shape in the growing gloom, darker than before, intent on finishing what the first had started. I knew then that I was still in danger. In the fray, I tightened my grip on the shard, ready to spring into action as the next creature took form. The air shimmered, trembling as if caught in fate's grasp, and my heart pounded so hard I could barely hear over the rush of adrenaline. "Come on, bring it on!" I shouted defiantly, and the shadows roared a distorted chorus of rage in response. The new form twisted, a grotesque figure slithering toward me, its body a mass of tangled shadows, constantly shifting like smoke. But its eyes, terrifyingly red, burned through the darkness, fixed on me with a predatory intensity that sent icy shivers down my spine. "Foolish little child," it rasped, voice like gravel, grinding together. "You think your light can save you?" The desperation clawed at my throat as I realized I was in the eye of a storm, surrounded by darkness but still lit by the fire of my resolve. Shadows surged toward me again, trying to envelop me once more, and I knew I had to act fast. "Your lies mean nothing to me," I shot back, raising the shard high. "You will not take me." But even as I yelled, I could feel the fear bubbling just beneath the surface, threatening to break through. A low rumble echoed through the air, a warning that made me tremble. The pulsating light flickered dangerously, and I forced myself to breathe deeply, steadying my racing heart. I have faced it all before, I told myself, letting the flickering hope solidify in my mind. I can do this. With that thought fueling me, I swung the shard toward the new creature, willing the energy to spiral forth. The urgent pulse of the shard ignited with light, the brilliance expanding like a supernova, chasing away the dark. But the darkness seemed to coil and twist, pulling itself together defiantly, fury radiating from it. The ground shook beneath me, a threat and warning all rolled into one, as shadows darted forward relentlessly. I stood tall, searching for a moment of clarity in the chaos, and then I pushed the energy forward with all the strength I could muster. "I will not yield," I cried, the words spilling forth with every ounce of determination. The light surged again, bright and unyielding, piercing the thick veil of shadow between us. I felt a momentary pause as the darkness hesitated, a flicker of fear crossing its red eyes. But then, with a screech that echoed like nails on a chalkboard, it lunged forward, shadows clawing at me in a desperate attempt to extinguish my light. I braced myself for impact, my heart pounding loudly in my ears. All I could do was focus on the shard. I could feel it straining, but I refused to let go. The shadows came at me like a tidal wave, thick and heavy, smothering any flash of light I had left. They clawed around my body, cold fingers creeping up my arms trying to pull me under. I gasped, fighting the chill that threatened to paralyze me. "Get off!" I shouted, my voice breaking as panic washed over me. I willed my body to move, to push through the darkness. It felt like I was trying to walk in molasses, each step heavy like lead. The shard pulsed in my hand, hot against my palm, reminding me of the light still within. But then I felt something sharp pierce through the shadows, pain slicing across my arm. It was a jarring reminder that the dark was no mere illusion. I screamed as the coldness seeped into my skin, shocking me back into focus. "No!" I yelled again, drawing energy from deep within. I thought of everything I'd seen, everything I was fighting for, The lost souls, the flickering hope, and the promise of light against the dark. I wouldn't let it steal my light. I gathered the last of my strength, raising up the shard high above my head. "You will not win," I bellowed, unleashing a surge of blinding light that ripped through the shadows. The scream of the creature echoed in my ears, a horrifying sound that reverberated through the very fabric of reality. I felt the grip of despair, trying to claw back, but the radiant light surged forward, dispelling the dark opulence around me. Shadows evaporated into a spray of black mist, and in that shimmering brilliance, I caught a glimpse of the wretched entity, its twisted face contorted in rage. But the shadows weren't finished. A deeper darkness surged from the corners, stretching and merging to form a more grotesque figure. It twisted grotesquely, like a serpent coiling to strike. I shuddered at its malicious grin, sharp teeth glistening in the slight glow. "Foolish child," it sneered, a voice laced with malice that dripped with mocking intensity, as if it relished my terror. "Your light will be extinguished. You will belong to the shadows." The words struck me deep, a chilling reminder that despair had teeth, and it was eager to sink them into me. I could feel my own resolve trembling under the weight of its presence. The air sparkled with a familiar dread, beckoning me to yield. "No, not again," I cried, forcing my will to stand, but the shadows lunged forward, relentless and hungry for the remnants of my light. They thrust themselves at me, a mass of swirling darkness, engulfing my vision once again. The cold fear gripped my heart as I felt them, the sharp edges of their forms whispering against my skin like ghostly fingers. I struggled to breathe, each breath coming in panicked gasps. It felt like I was sinking into an abyss, a swirling vortex of hopelessness threatening to consume me whole. Yet, in that suffocating darkness, I heard the faint echoes of the lost souls. They were whispers of courage, reminding me to fight for them. "You can't let it take you. Fight," they urged, and their encouragement reignited a flicker of fire in my heart. "I'm not afraid," I shouted, clenching the shard tightly as I twisted to break free from the tightening grip of shadows. I felt disoriented, but as flashes of light began to emerge from the shard again, I focused all my energy into it. Channeling every ounce of hope I had left, I screamed again, "I will not give in." The room exploded with light, blooming like a flower unfurling its petals in the darkest night. I felt energy surge forth from me, radiating bright enough to pierce through the thick veil of despair. The shadows shrieked, a cacophony of sounds that scratched at my ears as they recoiled. It was like fireworks shattering the stillness of a moonlit night, vibrant and terrifying all at once. And then I saw them, the faces of the souls who had vanished, flickering at the edges of the light, their eyes filled with hope and longing. They reached out to me, their expressions encouraging me not to stop. I pressed on, the light now forcing the entity back, its twisted figure losing solidity, melting like frost under the sun. "You think you can banish me? I will return," it screeched, voice rattling like thunder in my mind. With each word, I felt my resolve harden. "You can't take my light," I shouted, thrusting the shard forward, illuminating the entire room in a dazzling glow. "You will not claim me." The dark figure thrashed in a wretched fury, shadows pulsating like a storm casting clouds across the horizon. But the light only intensified, pushing against the shadows until they began to unravel completely. The ground shook with a violent tremor as the creature wailed, its form fracturing and collapsing in on itself like paper burning on a flame. I could see it, a whirlwind of shadows twisting, shrieking as the light obliterated its very essence. But as one shadow fell, another began to curl in its place, more insidious and malignant. I could feel it coiling around my ankles, anchoring me down as if pulling me into the earth itself. A deeper fear clawed at my insides, urging me to let go of the fight. "It only gets worse from here," a cold voice echoed from the depths of the darkness, creeping under my skin. The new tendrils slithered around me, moving in slow, deliberate motions that made my skin crawl. You will soon understand the true nature of despair. With every whisper, tendrils of darkness ensconced me further, tightening their grip, squeezing the resolve from my core. It was a new wave, more powerful, more primal, as if the earth beneath wanted to swallow me whole. "Please no," I gasped, realizing the weight of dread overhead, pressing down like a vice. But a glimmer of light remained, a pulse of determination that refused to yield. I gathered all my courage and focused on the faces of the souls I had encountered. I would not let this darkness take me. With a scream that rose from the deepest part of my being, I thrust the shard outward again, channeling every ounce of my fear into it. "You will not take me." Light flooded the room, a blinding finale igniting around me as I felt the tendrils slip and fade away, desperate screams echoing in response. I was now surrounded by a radiant sphere, breaking through all that sinuous dark. But even amidst the triumph, I felt something shift in the air. The stench of decay lingered around me, like a soul that refused to depart, tainting my pulse of victory. I looked around, searching for the source of the creeping dread. What emerged next shook me to my core, an ethereal light far darker than the shadows I had just banished. It was an endless void, an emptiness that gnawed at the edges of hope, pulling my thoughts into a whirlwind of terror. And as it crept closer, I could see into it, the horror beneath the surface, eyes opening wide, staring hungrily back at me. I felt vulnerability on full display, as if this gaping maw of darkness could swallow all that held my spirit, devouring everything I was. I stood frozen in place, fear wrapping its icy fingers around my heart once more. But I blinked against the looming void, forcing myself to draw strength from the burning light I had summoned. Even as the shadows undulated and lurked, I knew this was my fight. The darkness hadn't won yet. "Stand back," I commanded, finding my voice in the din. The light surged anew, illuminating the room and pushing against the encroaching void. Come on," I urged the shard, focusing on that flicker of hope, letting it guide me as I spread my arms wide. I could feel the warmth returning, igniting the core of my being. "I will not go quietly into the night," I declared, thrusting the shard forward with renewed vigor. With that, the shard shattered the barriers of fear. Brightness exploded in the chamber like a sun breaking through storm clouds. The emptiness quaked, dark eyes widening in disbelief, its form dissipating beneath the wave of light. But the thrill of victory was ephemeral. While one darkness dissolved, another began to materialize, rising like a miasma from the depths. An unsettling feeling crawled over me as I steadied my breath, sensing the imminent approach of yet another unseen threat. "Come on," I shouted futilely. But deep down, I could feel the shadows watching, their grasp forever lingering, waiting for me to falter. As a new creature began to take shape, lurking and twisting, a silhouette almost human, I braced for impact, unwilling to let fear grasp me again. "I'm ready," I whispered fiercely, the light pulsing boldly in defiance to all I had faced. It was time to decide. This battle was mine, and mine alone. I wouldn't let the darkness take me. Not now, not ever. The silhouette inched closer, a featureless shadow that seemed to absorb the light around it, creating a chilling contrast. I felt the temperature drop as the creature loomed, the air thick with a musty scent that made my stomach churn. The unsettling stillness wrapped around me like a shroud, almost suffocating. I could sense its intent, like an unseen predator waiting to pounce. "Come on, show yourself," I demanded, my voice barely above a whisper, yet it echoed louder than I expected. The sting of fear clawed at me, but I fought to maintain my composure. I fixed my gaze on that swollen mass of darkness as it shifted, forming limbs that moved with a sickening grace. The darkness pulsed, as if it had a heartbeat of its own, drawing nearer. Each breath I took felt heavier, infused with dread. "I can end this," I thought, trying to anchor my thoughts amidst the chaos. If I fight now, I'll break free from this nightmare. As I held the shard tighter, a bloom of warmth spread through my palm. The memories of all I had faced, the lost souls, the flickers of hope, fueled my desire to push back against the howling void. The shadow paused, its presence thickening in the air, and its emptiness seemed to mock me. "You think you can resist?" It hissed, the voice a chilling blend of whispers that slithered into my ears. Every word oozed malevolence, echoing with age-old hatred that sent tremors through my bones. "You're nothing in the face of true darkness." With each taunt, threads of fear coiled tighter around my chest, squeezing until I struggled to breathe. "You won't take me," I shouted defiantly, summoning all the courage I could muster, and thrusting the shard forward once again. Brilliant light shot from the shard, illuminating the terrifying figure. The light felt like a blade, cutting through the obsidian tendrils that reached for me. But the shadow didn't retreat. It absorbed the glow, twisting it into a sickly hue that flickered unsteadily, feeding off the warmth. It advanced, pulling me closer into the swirling depths of its form. I could hear echoes of despair rising like a haunting melody, the cries of souls lost long ago. Their cries were chilling, yet familiar, striking a deep chord of empathy within me. I felt the weight of their longing, their desperation merging with my own. "Help me!" I screamed as I felt the pull of despair trying to consume every part of me. I couldn't bear the thought of joining them in their agony. I couldn't let their fate become mine. The shadows twisted around, me weaving patterns that drew me closer, just enough that I could feel the chill of their presence crawling over my skin like insects. I gave an involuntary shudder, fighting against the creeping sensation of helplessness as I raised the shard once more. "Enough!" I yelled, desperation clawing at my throat. I focused everything I had into that small beacon of light. "You won't win." For a moment, I saw my energy swirl in rings around the darkness, pushing against the edge of despair. But then, just as quickly, the malevolent entity twisted its form, dark limbs intertwining and charging forward, a malevolent force that would stop at nothing to silence me. Suddenly, I felt something snap like a thread in the fabric of reality. I was thrown backward, landing hard on the cold ground, the shards slipping from grip. "No, no!" Panic surged through me as darkness enveloped the bright glimmer of hope. I reached desperately for the shard, my fingers grazing the cool surface just as the shadow lunged for me again, driving my face into the ground. I could feel its energy wrapping around me like barbed wire, cutting deeper with every moment I spent lost in its embrace. The voices of the lost intensified, drowning out my thoughts. Every whisper clawed at my sanity, urging me to submit, to give in to the void. I shut my eyes tightly, a single tear escaping as I wrestled with the pounding doubts in my head. But the flicker of strength remained, pulsing just beneath the surface. Even as I struggled against the overwhelming force, I felt a spark ignite within me. I had not come this far to let it end here. I rolled over, forcing the weight of despair off my chest, and lunged for the shard. I grasped it tightly once more, feeling the warmth seep back through my fingers. "You will not break me." The darkness momentarily recoiled, its form shifting and twisting as if searching for an escape. For an instant, I thought I saw hesitation in its void-like features. Fueled by that glimpse of weakness, I sprang to my feet, light bursting forth from the shard. "Go back to the hell you crawled out of," I yelled, brandishing the shard like a sword, aiming directly at the heart of the dark creature. The light erupted outward, illuminating every corner of the space as it battled against the tendrils of shadow. They shrieked in agony, curling away from the blazing flame erupting from my core. The shrieks were primal, chilling me to my very bones, but I stood firm, feeling the light grow stronger and more vibrant. "Your time is over," I declared, stepping forward as the darkness writhed and twisted, its jagged edges splintering as if they were glass. Tendrils began to snap away, falling to the ground like leaves in the autumn breeze, leaving behind nothing but a thick haze of emptiness. Yet amidst my triumph, the world around me shifted. The ground trembled violently, splintering beneath the weight of the conflict. I could feel the fear radiating from the darkness, and I sensed it was far from finished. Such futile arrogance, it seethed, its voice twisting into something deeper, more sinister. As the shadows whirled anew, they began to stretch and contort, morphing into a monstrous shape that loomed above me, its grotesqueness defying the very laws of nature. With every heartbeat, I could feel a new chill settling in the air, an overwhelming sense of dread that clutched at my throat. The jagged edges of its mass shimmered ominously, pulsing as if they held secrets from the void itself. You were never meant to prevail, it boomed, echoing through the chamber, a mocking resonance that sent tremors through my soul. And in that moment, I saw them again. The faces of the souls lost in darkness flickered upon its surface, anguished expressions twisted in their struggle. They were trapped, their cries pleading to be freed. I didn't want their suffering to be in vain. They can't take you, I whispered to myself, a reminder of the strength that still pulsed within me. You can save them. You can save yourself. With renewed determination, I raised the shard to the sky, feeling the energy soar like wildfire within. The blinding light raced outward, cascading onto the monstrous creature that now towered over me, distorting its very essence. "Begone!" I screamed, pouring every ounce of energy, every fragment of hope I held onto into that blinding light. I felt a deafening roar resound from the creature, a sound so primal it shook the very air around me. And in that moment, I realized something critically important. I was not battling the shadows alone. I was fighting for all the souls caught in this dark web, pulling strength from their stories woven deep within me. As the light expanded, swallowing the encroaching darkness, their faces emerged boldly in the glow, urging me on. A collective energy surged, linking us together, pushing back the shadows that sought to consume us all. But the darkness wasn't done. As I pressed forward, I felt a new wave of despair wash over me, a chilling reminder that it hadn't finished fighting. I gritted my teeth, focusing on the pulse of light I generated. The creature drew closer, its form splintering and shifting, as if creating a darkness more powerful, more furious than before. "Fight!" I heard the lost soul's whispers merge into one steady voice, compelling me to stand firm against the evil that threatened to snuff out my light. I could feel the darkness striving to twist my hope into something unrecognizable. My heart raced as I raised the shard again. I will not be afraid. The pulse of light resonated around me, stretching toward the shadows like a beacon in a storm. This was my battle, and this time I would win. I felt the shard tremble in my grip, its radiance flaring like a wildfire against the consuming darkness. The creature shrieked, a sound so harsh it rattled my bones, echoing through the air. As I held firm, the swirling shadows around me began to split and unravel, but they were relentless. They lashed out like angry serpents, their tendrils searching for any weakness to exploit. The glimmer of light I had gathered grew, but it felt like a mere flicker against the storm of despair surrounding me. The dark mass contorted and morphed, taking on more grotesque forms, each more horrifying than the last. I caught glimpses of faces twisted in torment, screaming silently at me, trapped in the ever-expanding darkness that loomed around me. "Help us," they cried, their voices melding into a haunting, eerie chorus, filling my mind with dread. The cries echoed all around, a resonance that sent shivers down my spine. I could feel their pain piercing through the haze, urging me to break free from my own terror. But that was when I realized the truth. This darkness wasn't just a creature. It was alive, thrumming with the agony and fears of countless souls trapped within it. I could feel it feeding off the very fear that threatened to consume me. I knew I had to act, or I would lose myself to the shadows. With a deep breath, I focused on the light within me, the warmth spreading through my veins like a protective shield. The chaotic swirl of dark masses around me attempted to pull me under, but I felt my resolve harden. "Leave me be!" I hollered, my voice trembling but strong. I reached forward with the shard, thrusting it into the dark energy like a spear aimed at its heart. The blinding light erupted again, throwing the shadows back, illuminating the disturbing shapes that formed within them. It was a nightmare coming to life. The figures of the lost souls began to shift, writhing in agony within the darkness. Their faces melted into grotesque images of fear, fear that was laced with despair and longing. I felt a deep pang in my chest. They needed me, and I needed them too, to understand the struggle and pain that bound us together in this dark tapestry. Suddenly, a flurry of shadows surged forth, breaking through my barrier of light. The sickening stench of decay filled the air, a rancid reminder of everything that had perished in the inky void. I recoiled, my instincts screaming at me to run, to hide. But every pulse of fear fed the entity, making it stronger, more menacing. "Stand firm," I thought to myself, forcing my feet to stay rooted to the ground. I couldn't let it win. The shadow lunged, its form expanding like a tide, enveloping me whole and drowning out the light. I gasped as thick darkness wrapped around me, constricting my throat, squeezing my breath into shallow gasps. The cold seeped into my bones, and I could feel panic rising as the memories of my own fears echoed in my mind. "Why are you still fighting? You are mine now," the creature hissed venomously, the voice swirling around me with an unsettling rhythm. The tendrils twisted tighter, and I felt a dull ache bloom in my chest, as if something vital was being extracted from my very being. I closed my eyes against the suffocating darkness, feeling the barrier between reality and nightmare blur. The shadows wrapped around me like a suffocating blanket, the whispers twisting into an unsettling symphony of despair that pulled at my sanity. And then, like a distant surfacing dream, I heard it again, the chorus of souls, their fragmented pleas intertwining with my own heartbeat. "You can escape. You can save us." That flicker of hope ignited a spark deep within me. I drew strength from their cries, channeling their pain into my own will. "You won't take me," I gasped, the shard growing warmer in reply, pulsing with newfound energy. I was determined to break free. I couldn't let the darkness claim any more lives. With every ounce of determination I had, I focused on the light, igniting it into a brilliant explosion that shattered the hold of shadows binding me. Light burst forth, piercing the murky darkness like the dawn of a new day. The shadows recoiled as if burned, shrieking in fury from the touch of brilliance. I felt the weight lift from my shoulders, the grip of despair loosening its hold at last. "Now!" I roared, driving the shard through the air like a bolt of lightning directed at the heart of the creature. The surge of light engulfed everything, and I could feel the darkness writhing against it, fighting a losing battle. But just when I thought I had the upper hand, a devastating howl erupted from the depths. The shadows coiled again, reforming into a massive figure that loomed above, more monstrous than before. "Foolish child," it thundered, voice rumbling like distant thunder. "You think you have the power to resist me? I will swallow your light. I will take everything you cherish." Terror gripped my heart anew as I realized how fast the darkness was overtaking me, an endless abyss drowning out all hope. In a panic, I scanned the arena around me, looking for something, anything, to ground me. That's when I caught sight of them again, the faces trapped within the twisted shadows. They were melded together, writhing in pain, their eyes wide and pleading with me. "Fight!" they cried out in unison, their voices blending into a haunting echo that filled the air. Tears stung my eyes as I saw the people I wished to save. I couldn't let them down. I took a moment to breathe, to gather my strength, feeling that fiery determination rise from within. I would not bend to the darkness. "Release them," I shouted, raising the shard once more, the pulse of light against my palm burning with intensity. As the darkness lunged at me, eager to consume everything in its path, I charged forward, meeting the encroaching shadows head-on. In that moment, the world became a swirling tempest of light and dark. I plunged the shard into the heart of the creature, a brilliant burst of energy erupting around me like a nuclear explosion. The shadows twisted and screamed in pain, horrific faces evaporating into nothingness, their energy released at last. Then, as the glass-like form shattered around me, I felt a surge of relief wash over me. The horror was finally retreating, unraveling like frayed thread pulled from the fabric of reality. But the darkness within the remnants howled with rage, a low growl that sent fear skittering down my spine. "You will pay for this," it seethed, as newfound shadows began to creep from the corners of my mind, unwelcome and relentless. I could feel their malice seeping back in, slick and oily like spilled ink, swirling together in a grotesque dance. I stumbled backward as they advanced, cold fingers reaching for me from the depths, each one filled with regret and fear. "No!" I screamed, shielding myself with the shard, striving to push back the encroaching shadows. "You can't keep me. I'm not afraid." But fear was creeping in, slithering like a serpent around the edges of my consciousness. Each breath came shallow as the darkness tightened its grip, melding into the air and dimming the light. The faces of the lost souls began to emerge again, not in torment this time, but in warning, their expressions twisted with urgency. "You must find the core," they cried, pointing into the ominous void that loomed at the edges of my vision. "It holds a key." The clarity of their message pierced through the fog of terror, igniting a desperate spark within me. I had to find it, the core of the darkness that fed on despair. If I could destroy it, I could free them once and for all. "Where is it?" I whispered, feeling my heart race as I scanned the environment, the shadows shifting, morphing like quicksand around me. Their whispers grew louder, the agonizing static causing my heart to race. "Beneath your feet," they implored, as the darkness rippled, exposing a fissure in the ground, a gaping maw that beckoned me toward its depths. I hesitated for only a moment before I plunged into the gaping void, feeling the air grow colder with each step. As I descended, shadows closed in around me, but I kept my gaze on the pulsating light that shone faintly below. Each pulse trembled with a deep, ancient energy calling out to me. I could sense the terrible weight of despair growing, pressing against my spirit like 1,000 chains. "I can do this," I reminded myself. The farther I traveled, the more strength coursed through me. Finally, as I reached the bottom, I stood before a swirling mass, an orb of darkness pulsating with sickly energy. It throbbed like a heartbeat, an entity that felt alive and aware. My stomach churned as I approached, the air thick with tension, shadows lashing out with every hesitant step. With a deep breath, I lifted the shard high, feeling its warmth intensify. "You will be vanquished," I bellowed, narrowing my focus on that dark core that seemed to thrive on despair. The shadows writhed in fury as the light from the shard built to a blinding brilliance, drowning out the darkness that had surrounded me for so long. I had to end this. "No more!" I screamed, plunging the shard into the heart of the void, the climax of light surging forth as the dark mass shivered, releasing a cacophony of anguished wails. In that moment, I felt a powerful shockwave race through me, pulling my soul into the radiant energy. Time seemed to bend. Shadows exploded around me, shrieks echoing like thunder as the pulse of despair shattered, fragmenting into sparks, each one freeing a soul caught in limbo. I was engulfed in dazzling light, feeling pieces of hope unfurling within. But just as I thought victory was close, one final shadow emerged, larger than anything I had faced before. It towered above me, stretching endlessly into the void, eyes burning with raw hatred. "You cannot escape this," it bellowed, deep and resonant, just as the brilliance of the light waned. The air crackled with electric tension, and I saw chaos spilling over. And then, darkness surged once more, flooding toward me like a ravenous tide. Every inch of my skin prickled with terror. Every muscle tensed as I felt the cold encroach around my body. The massive shadow loomed over me, its form twisting and writhing like an amorphous nightmare, a creature birthed from the depths of every deep-seated fear I had ever sheltered. It stretched toward me, clammy tendrils reaching with predatory intent, and I stumbled backward, desperately trying to keep my balance in the disorienting space. "Run! You have to run!" a voice shouted within my mind, almost drowned out by the beast's god-awful growl. But there was nowhere to go. The very ground felt alive, shifting beneath my feet, its surface undulating like a stormy sea. I took one faltering step away from the encroaching shadows when I felt them grab at me, clawing and tearing at my clothes, pulling me back toward the core of darkness, toward the heart of despair. "No!" I screamed, fighting against the grip of fear. I summoned every ounce of willpower within me to push against the darkness consuming me. I thrust the shard forward, the small weapon of light trembling against the onslaught. "You're not my end," I shouted defiantly. Suddenly, an agonizing wail ripped through the atmosphere. The creature recoiled, thousands of dark forms popping and bursting like balloons filled with despair, releasing indistinguishable whispers, sounds of anguish and desperation resonating all around. I could hear the soul's cries echoing in my ears, chanting for freedom, for release from their dark prison. But the terror grew heavier. The darkness began to concentrate around me, swirling violently, forming into a tall, twisted figure, with a face that was a distorted reflection of my own. Its hollow eyes burned with malice as it reached out a clawed hand toward me, long fingers stretching unnaturally wide, a glint of jagged teeth barely visible within its shadowy maw. "Look at what you've become," it hissed, voice a low whisper that crawled under my skin. "You are nothing without your fear. You are just like us." It knew my thoughts, it knew my weaknesses. I felt my heart thunder, the doubt creeping in, gnawing at my resolve. Panic wrapped around me like a vice, bringing waves of nausea that threatened to pull me under. I felt its presence seep into my mind, dredging up memories long buried, moments of shame, failures, and fears that I had tried to forget. "Remember that time you failed?" It taunted, words dripping with mockery, clawing at the corners of my sanity. The walls of my mind wavered, images flashing like snapshots, a time when I didn't measure up, a moment when I lost someone dear, the ache of loneliness clawing at my heart. The weight was suffocating, shadows wrapping tighter around me, squeezing out the last bits of sunlight. But then something shifted within me. The shard. The warmth returned ever so slightly, rekindling hope amidst the choking terror. I thought of all those trapped souls. Their appeal for freedom gave me strength. With grit, I took a step forward, willing the shard to glow brighter, feeling its energy coursing through me again. "You are wrong," I shouted at the monstrous reflection, feeling defiance bubble within me. "I am not you," the dark figure shrieked, and for the first time, it faltered, hesitating as I pushed the shard against my chest, letting its brilliance pierce through the veil of shadows. The light exploded outward in a radiant wave, snapping tendrils away and illuminating the gripping darkness that surrounded me. The air crackled with energy as the dark creature recoiled, its shape blurring, a chaotic mass forming and forking back as if I had struck a vicious blow. But I could see it. Pulsing at the center of that haze was the core of despair, a swirling mist that seemed to draw from every ounce of fear it could find. Fueled by rage, I pressed forward, each step echoing loudly like thunder in my ears. "You will not win. It was time to put an end to this." This was the moment I would fight back against the storm that had raged inside me for so long. But just as I felt the shards of darkness shatter beneath my courage, the creature let out a spine-chilling roar, reverberating through the very core of my being as if my soul were being cracked in two. "Stop her! She cannot touch the core!" It bellowed, and tendrils shot toward me from every direction, dark and glistening, like writhing snakes hungry for flesh. I twisted and ducked, narrowly escaping their grasp. But more continued to advance, rushing at me like a dark tidal wave determined to pull me down. "Think again!" I shouted, thrusting the shard into the path of the onslaught, the light flaring brilliantly, forcing the shadows back. Yet the darkness roared with renewed fury. "You will become part of us," it hissed, and I could feel despair clawing back into my heart, slick and oily, dragging down all my hopes and dreams. Every ounce of strength I had felt like it was slipping from my grasp, dragging me back down into the abyss I had fought so hard to escape. What do I do? What do I do? My mind raced, and I felt panic rising, a wave that wanted to pull me under. The shadows advanced, but I couldn't let them win. Not now. A glimmer of determination sparked inside once more. I focused again on the core, mustering what remained of my strength as the light from the shard pulsed in rhythm with my heartbeat. "I will not be afraid," I yelled, pushing the shard deeper into the mass, feeling its energy surge with undeniable force. With a sudden shudder, the ground shook violently beneath me. The shadows writhed, convulsing as if struck by a bolt of lightning, a roar of rage echoing through the air. Then the stream of darkness halted, quivering as if caught in an agonizing balance between light and fear, between hope and despair. The creature's massive form began to break apart, shadows and limbs unraveling at the seams. In that instant, I saw my chance. I darted forward, aiming with every ounce of strength I could muster. The pulse of light swelled even further, and I felt the energy course through me like wildfire, overwhelming and intoxicating. "Now is the time," I declared, plunging the shard straight into the heart of the darkness. As the light erupted, the shadows screamed, the noise shattering the air like cracking glass. Tendrils flailed wildly, whipping around me, but the brilliance pierced through it all, illuminating the darkness like the dawn breaking after a long night. I felt the energy reverberate through me, coursing through my veins and bringing warmth to my frozen bones. I was alive in that moment, standing before that which I feared most. The anguish of the trapped souls surged into the air, mixing with the pulse of light and lifting the weight of despair from my shoulders. But just as I thought victory was near, the shadows reformed, thicker and denser than before. "Foolish child," it roared, voice like rolling thunder, chaotic and filled with unspeakable wrath. The darkness began to condense again, reforming into a monstrous figure, this one even larger, towering above me like a thick storm cloud ready to consume everything. The hatred radiating from it felt raw, visceral, and real. "No," I gasped, my heart rattling in my chest like a caged beast. But the determination flickered once more, a fierce defiance against the rising fear. I raised the shard higher, every ounce of light surging toward the shadow figure. "This ends now." I charged forward, diving into the depths of shadow once again, my spirit igniting with renewed hope. But what met me was not a passage of darkness, but a chasm swirling with memories and fears, each one faced and changed, beckoning me forward into the depths of my past. "Embrace me," the darkness murmured, its voice curling around me like smoke. "I am you, and you are me." I felt my knees buckle beneath the weight of the truth. Each shadow within that chasm represented a fear I had, a piece of me I hid from the world. But this time, the shard burned in my hand, casting a brilliant light through the endless void. "I am not afraid," I repeated, each word a mantra against the onslaught of my thoughts. I drew strength from the light and continued forward, recognizing the shapes swirling around me, faces familiar yet distorted, beckoning me to join them in their eternal sorrow. I could feel them draw near, but I was resolute. "You don't own me," I shouted, thrusting the shard through a swirling mass, the explosive energy illuminating the very fabric of my nightmare. The souls began to ripple, finally emerging from the shadows, faces lighting up with relief as they drifted toward the luminosity. Light spilled outward, relentless against the shadows still clinging to my heels. But I charged on, determined to push past the darkness, determined to free myself from the grip of despair that threatened to wrap around my throat. But even as I pressed forward, I felt the creeping fear tugging at me, a sinister echo in the vastness, a reminder that even amidst the light, shadows lurked, waiting, watching, plotting their return. I could feel them draw near, but I was resolute. "You don't own me," I shouted, thrusting the shard through a swirling mass, the explosive energy illuminating the very fabric of my nightmare. The souls began to ripple, finally emerging from the shadows, their faces lighting up with relief as they drifted toward clarity. But a deep, low growl rumbled behind me, piercing the moment of triumph like a knife. The shadows coiled, morphing into a chaotic mass, unyielding as it surged toward me with an insatiable hunger. The air felt charged, thick with malice, sending a chill down my spine. I turned to face the monstrosity again, now an even more grotesque version of itself, limbs stretching and writhing as tendrils lashed out, seeking to bind me once more. "Do you really think you can escape?" It hissed, its voice a bone-chilling whisper that resonated in the depths of my being. "I will drag you down into the depths of despair, and you will join the others." Fear threatened to swallow me whole, but I couldn't waver. The trapped souls floated around the edges of my vision, their eyes urging me to remember my strength. "I won't give up," I yelled, but doubt crept into me like poison. What if this was all for nothing? What if the darkness was too powerful, too deep-rooted to destroy? In that moment of uncertainty, the darkness lunged with a ferocity unlike anything I had faced before. Tendrils wrapped around my arms, pulling at me with a vice-like grip. I fought back, my heart racing as I felt the chill seep into my bones, desperation rising within me. "Get off!" I screamed, swinging my shard with all my might, the light flaring brighter as it connected with the writhing mass. The shadows hissed, recoiling from the brilliance like they were being burned. The faces of the lost souls flickered in my mind as I pushed back against the shadows. Each flickering visage filled me with courage, reminding me of the lives I fought to save. With renewed determination surging through me, I gathered all I had left and focused on the core, the heart of the darkness. "This ends now," I roared, charging forward, the shard gripped tightly in my fist. The dark figure screeched in fury, and I could see the desperation in its eyes as I closed in on the core. In one swift movement, I plunged the shard deep into the swirling mass, letting it unleash a blinding light that pierced through the very essence of the darkness. The agonizing scream that erupted felt almost deafening, echoing through the air like a banshee's wail. The shadows twisted and convulsed, the malevolent grip on my soul faltering as the radiant energy began to shred apart the darkness. The core erupted, releasing a shockwave that ripped through the chasm like an earthquake. The souls around me screamed in unison, their voices finally free, each one bursting into light and ascending like stars breaking through a stormy night. I felt their energy merging with mine, filling me with strength, electrifying my spirit, and overriding the shadows that fought to pull me back. But just when I believed I had won, I glanced back at the swirling darkness, only to see it forming once more, the malevolent creature reassembling in its feral rage. "You think this could destroy me?" It roared, the ground trembling as it expanded, growing larger, angrier. "You will never be free." Panic engulfed me again, but it was cut through by the brightness of the shard, urging me forward. "I will break your hold," I cried, feeling the light surge within me, feeding off the spirits of those I had liberated. I charged the figure once more, striking hard against the mass, every swing sending ripples of energy blazing through the shadows. The creature bucked and howled, but it began to fragment, an angry storm of blackness scattering into the air. "You are mine," it shrieked, but its voice was fading, echoing like the last whispers of a nightmare. In a chain reaction, the darkness collapsed, buzzing with fury, retreating into itself as if imploding under the sheer force of the light. I felt invigorated, my heart pounding with triumph, and I held the shard aloft like a torch, watching the malevolence dissolve into the ether, leaving behind nothing but silence. As peace washed over the remnants of the battleground, I realized I had a choice to make. The shadows were still there, and I would always have to fight against the darkness inside and around me. But I was done running. I was done allowing fear to grasp me. With the spirits swirling around me, radiant and whole, I turned my gaze skyward, knowing that I had won this battle. The darkness waned, but its echoes remained, warning me that fear and despair would always loom. Yet I felt empowered, knowing that within me lay the light to face whatever shadows might come. I raised the shard one last time and whispered, "I choose light," my voice unwavering. And in that moment, I understood that even the deepest shadows could not erase the light within me. The journey would continue, but for now I was free,